Hey guys, tonight we journey into the dreamy realm of ancient Greece, where star-filled skies stretch overhead, stone temples glimmer in the distance, and a certain king's bizarre fixation with donkeys awaits us. You slip under the covers, already feeling the day's weight melt from your shoulders, and imagine stepping onto a winding path through olive groves under the moonlight. The classical world hums around you, crickets chirp, leaves rustle in a balmy breeze. Of course, you might not survive this mythic encounter with your sanity intact. Because, frankly, what's a bedtime story without a dramatic threat that heightens your curiosity? Still, the goal is a good night's sleep, so rest assured we'll keep things gentle. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Then, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is right now. It's always fascinating to see the wide variety of bedtime schedules and time zones we're all tucked away in. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You feel the hush of night closing in as you continue wandering along the torchlit roads of an ancient kingdom. One that whispers a name etched in gold and donkey ears alike: Midas. The sheer mention of this king conjures images of golden goblets, glittering treasure, and a cautionary tale about a too greedy wish gone wrong. But tonight, you sense there's more to Midas than the famous golden touch. Yes, that donkey obsession is part of the story, and it's far stranger, and, surprisingly enough, more entertaining than you might expect. The wind sighs past tall cypress trees, making them sway like mysterious guardians. You tread softly over smooth stones, each step bringing you deeper into this half-forgotten world. Lamp-lit doorways peek at you from the corners of small villages where people slumber behind shuttered windows. In your mind, the air smells faintly of honey, sweet incense, and baked bread. Occasionally, you pass a stray cat or two, perched on crumbling walls, yellow eyes shining with ancient secrets. You might imagine them tipping their heads at you in silent greeting. Some historians still argue whether King Midas was entirely legendary or partially based on a real ruler of Phrygia in the 8th century BCE. A mainstream historical fact is that archaeologists have uncovered tombs in central Turkey possibly linked to the real Midas, replete with lavish grave goods that hint at wealth. However, the donkey part, that's where things get weird. A quirky tidbit says that certain cults in antiquity revered donkeys for their stubborn loyalty and unexpected intelligence. Perhaps that partially explains how donkey mania slipped into Midas's legend. Or maybe it's just a comedic twist that stuck, because, well, donkey ears on a king get a good laugh. You pause by a small orchard bursting with ripe figs, the fruit heavy in your hand. You can almost taste the sweet juice trickling down your chin as you take a thoughtful bite. If only every mythic journey was this pleasant, basking under moonlight, free figs, and no monstrous hydras or cyclopes interrupting your midnight stroll. Then again, we haven't reached the donkey portion of the tale, and that has its own brand of curiosity. In the hush of evening, you recall the swirl of rumors you've heard Midas, the king who turned everything he touched into gold. Definitely not recommended for tonight's bedtime cocoa. Midas, the king who might have offended the gods, leading to a curse of donkey ears. Definitely not recommended if you're trying to rock the latest royal hairdo. And Midas, who, despite his questionable tastes, evidently had a soft spot for animals, especially those four-legged braying ones. 3 jokes in and we're already donkey deep in weirdness. As you wander, imagine you're trailing Midas's footprints. Perhaps you see where he might have walked before you, boots stirring the dust of ancient roads. The night air grows quieter, and it feels like the entire kingdom is nodding off, an entire realm dozing under starlight. You wonder if Midas once tiptoed this way, suspiciously checking behind him to ensure no one noticed his slowly lengthening donkey ears. Sure, that visual might be enough to pop a grin onto your face. But in a world teeming with myths, it's just part of the tapestry. On one side of the path, the stone wall is adorned with faint etchings. Lean closer, and in the flickering glow of a torch, you might interpret images of dancing figures, vines, and, hidden in a corner, something suspiciously resembling donkey ears. Perhaps a bored artisan once carved a quiet reminder of their king's secret. If walls could talk, these ones might crack a joke or two about the most surprising donkey obsession in antiquity. You continue deeper into the realm, the road meandering upward, offering glimpses of far-off mountainous silhouettes. The darkness highlights the ancient city perched on a hillside, where Midas once held court. Flickering flames of braziers and torches glint against marble columns, forming a scattered constellation below the real one in the sky. You feel a hush like stepping into a grand but sleepy stage set, with the night itself as a gentle audience. Somewhere in that city, Midas dreams. Perhaps he sleeps in a lavish chamber, lulled by the hush of a gently strummed lyre, or perhaps he tosses and turns on a bed that's entirely too golden for its own good. You picture him restlessly adjusting a pillow under donkey ears, trying not to crush them. The idea draws out a quiet chuckle. Admittedly, it's hard not to find a bit of humor in the image, even if you keep your laughter hush for fear of waking the king. Yet this is where we begin. The story that will lull you into restful oblivion is all about how Midas got those peculiar ears and how he navigated the comedic and humiliating aspects of having them. You'll see how, bizarre though it may seem, the donkey motif played a surprisingly huge role in shaping his identity in the eyes of others. Instead of a typical golden greed story, you'll discover a more personal, equally strange saga that merges epic myth and understated comedic flair. And right now, as your eyelids grow heavier, it's the perfect narrative to usher you towards sleep, step by step, donkey bray by donkey bray. In the quiet calm, you reflect on how myths often serve as cautionary tales, moral lessons wrapped in shimmering legends. Midas is typically used to highlight the dangers of greed, but there's another angle here. Sometimes our small obsessions, be they donkey, centered or something else, can balloon into larger-than-life burdens. And yet, on the flip side, they might just lead to an unexpected path of growth and humility. Not that you'd ever request donkey ears for yourself. Then again, people do pay money for some strange spy treatments nowadays, so who knows? The city gates loom ahead, tall and thick with ancient wood and iron studs. A pair of sleepy guards lean on their spears, barely registering your soft footfalls. An owl perched on the gatehouse hoots once, then glides away into the moonlit sky. Everything feels serene, almost enchanted. You pass under the archway into the city's winding streets, breathing in the faint smell of burnt olive oil from guttering lamps. Here, the buildings cluster close, with narrow alleys that twist under stone balconies and plastered walls that flicker in dancing torchlight. It's a labyrinth you might happily get lost in, at least for tonight. Drifting along, you catch your reflection in a small fountain. Water trickles from a stone lion's mouth, the gentle murmur like a lullaby. You wonder how the night can feel so peaceful when a comedic donkey curse roams somewhere in the pages of tomorrow's story. But that's the beauty of bedtime journeys. They invite you to appreciate the quiet corners of fantasy before the storyline truly awakens. And so you let the hush cradle you, each step softening your thoughts until you're on the verge of dreamy surrender. Still, a gentle excitement stirs in you soon. You'll learn exactly how Midas's donkey fascination seeped into his royal life. For now, you savor the lull in the atmosphere of starlight and torch glow, fully content that your bed, your blankets, and your slow, rhythmic breathing are all weaving together to form the perfect cradle for slumber. You continue along the winding streets of the ancient city, where each corner reveals new stories etched in stone and shadow. Ahead, a quieter path leads toward what might have once been a modest residential quarter. Imagine rows of humble, single-story houses built from sun-baked bricks, courtyards open to the sky, and small gardens where herbs and flowers grew. It's here, down this unassuming lane, that you sense the echoes of young Midas, long before riches, curses, and donkey ears turned his life into a cautionary tale. You pass a weathered wooden gate left ajar, the hinges squeaking in a hush, as if inviting you to step back in time. In your mind's eye, you see Midas as a child, a gentle boy with wide, inquisitive eyes, more likely to chase after grasshoppers than brandish a toy sword. According to some accounts, his upbringing was calm and rather unremarkable, certainly not the stuff of dramatic epics. He might have played in dusty courtyards under his nurse's watchful eye, splashing water at pigeons and occasionally giggling at the bray of passing donkeys. Those donkeys, you sense, held an extra spark for him, a curious magnetism he never quite outgrew. Nobody at the time suspected that this innocent fascination would one day become legendary. Now, historians still argue whether Midas was a single historical figure or a composite of several rulers called by that same name. The mainstream historical fact is that there was indeed a King Midas of Phrygia around the 8th century BCE, known from Assyrian inscriptions for his dealings with neighboring kingdoms. But how much of the donkey lore clings to the real Midas versus a mythical mishmash? That's where the lines blur. A quirky tidbit from local folklore suggests that in parts of Phrygia, donkeys were highly valued not only for their labor, but also for the comedic entertainment they provided in small festivals. Imagine donkey races accompanied by raucous music. One can guess that a young Midas, with a mild temperament and a playful imagination, might have gravitated to these braying beasts with a little more enthusiasm than his peers. As you walk past the simple dwellings, you catch faint aromas of baked bread and cooked barley seeping from cracks in ancient walls. The night is so still that you can almost hear the distant murmur of the city's main square. It's as if time itself has slowed to accommodate the hush of your footfalls. A cat scampers past, chasing something unseen, and a subtle laugh escapes your lips. If cats could talk, they'd likely have endless tales of private courtyards and secret donkey adoration, including the day Midas discovered his first donkey friend. That might seem like an odd buddy for a royal child, but consider this your first comedic nudge. At least the donkey was less likely to judge Midas's weird ear obsession than a snooty aristocrat might. Score 1 for the donkey as the ultimate confidant. Legend has it that in his early years, Midas spent many afternoons exploring the countryside, wandering through olive groves and vineyards. Imagine him perched on a small hill, the sun warming his face, while a donkey stood at his side, braying at intervals that only the boys seemed to find charming. Folks might have shaken their heads. There goes the little prince with his donkey again. But they likely brushed it off as an endearing quirk. After all, children often latch onto curious fascinations. Some kids collect shiny rocks, others pretend they're heroic warriors. Young Midas, he seemed to prefer the unassuming donkey to any gilded plaything. Cue your second comedic aside. Better a donkey friend than a golden teddy bear that might weigh a few £100s. Meanwhile, palace life in the capital city of Phrygia continued at its usual unhurried pace. While many Greek states were locked in constant rivalries and skirmishes, Midas's corner of the map enjoyed a relatively peaceful era, at least for a time. The king who preceded Midas, likely his father, valued diplomacy and trade, forging alliances that enriched the kingdom with farmland, livestock, and of course, a robust donkey population. Visitors from across the region brought exotic wares and curious traditions. Midas would have wandered the palace halls, quietly observing negotiations between foreigners dressed in colorful, exotic robes and local courtiers who wore simpler, homespun clothes. It's in these early glimpses of life that you might imagine the seeds of Midas's eccentricities taking root. Perhaps he noticed how trade goods often included donkey caravans loaded with spices or copper, and he'd watch them unload with wide-eyed wonder. Maybe he marveled at how donkeys could carry heavy burdens without complaint. Well, aside from the occasional bray, Midas might have concluded that, in some small but significant way, donkeys were as good as gold. They made life easier, they had a funny personality, and they seemed loyal to their owners. But no one, of course, expected him to one day embody that donkey spirit quite so literally. As you slip further along the cobblestone path, you pass a low stone wall that encloses what remains of a small orchard. In the moon's soft glow, you notice that some fruit trees have grown wild, twisted branches offering dark silhouettes against the starry sky. You picture a young Midas climbing one of these trees to grab a piece of fruit and offering a share to his donkey companion. Perhaps he'd toss it over to the grateful beast, giggling at the loud crunch. It's a warm, homey scene, albeit a bit comedic. Imagine the donkey's ears twitching as it devours a sweet peach. Third comedic job, an apple a day keeps the doctor away, but apparently, a donkey with a peach is unstoppable. Occasionally, you overhear the hushed conversations of modern archaeologists, speculating on the daily lives of these ancient inhabitants. They piece together clues from pottery shards, leftover seeds, and remnants of old foundations. The hush of the night around you seems to amplify the voices of the past, as though the walls want to divulge their secrets. One scholar might whisper that Midas was indeed raised amid moderate privilege, shaped more by his environment than by war or strife. Another might counter that this gentle upbringing is mythologized, arguing Midas was actually a cunning politician from a young age, leveraging alliances to fortify his rule. A third might chime in with that open scholarly debate phrase. Historians still argue whether the earliest Midas references were purely symbolic, or if they reflect a single, historically verifiable figure with an odd donkey obsession. And there you have it, the swirling stew of speculation that keeps Midas firmly on the cusp between legend and fact. Near the orchard, a faint path meanders toward a small shrine. In this dreamlike quiet, you might even hear an echo of chanting or the soft ring of a sistrum. Religious devotion in ancient times often blended seamlessly with daily life. Shrines were commonplace, and so were offerings to various gods and nymphs. You wonder if young Midas, whenever he felt troubled or lonely, might have left a little offering for the donkey gods. Yes, donkey gods existed here and there in ancient lore. Some fringe cults worshipped them for their stamina and fertility. It's a testament to the variety of beliefs that once flourished, all interwoven like threads in a much larger tapestry of spirituality. Here lies your quirky or fringe tidbit. Donkey deities weren't exactly mainstream, but they popped up in pockets of the ancient world where local worship took on unique, sometimes head-scratching forms. As you pause by the shrine, the moonlight illuminating the stone steps, you sense the seeds of Midas's future, a peaceful childhood, overshadowed by a gentle but odd fascination. The boy who giggled at donkey brays would one day become a king, forging alliances, building wealth, then stumbling into a predicament that would immortalize him in myth. Tonight, however, in this hush of a moonlit orchard, Midas is just a child with wide eyes, no donkey ears to speak of, and no notion of the comedic twists that fate has in store. You take one last look at the orchard wall. A breeze stirs the branches overhead, rustling leaves that shimmer in the moonlight. Then you continue on, feet padding softly along the next stretch of road, carrying with you the picture of a mild, unassuming boy who, in a simpler world, might have stayed that way, quiet, contemplative, enthralled by the bray of a donkey. But destiny, as it so often does in these ancient tales, had much more theatrical plans in store. From that modest orchard scene, the road stretches onward, guiding you deeper into Midas's unfolding life. Before long, you find yourself meandering near the heart of his future kingdom, where rooftops and temple spires shine under the glow of a rising sun. Though in your dreamy reverie, it might be a perpetual twilight. Time is fluid here, letting you witness Midas as a youth stepping into adulthood, with all the new responsibilities and temptations that come from ruling a land blessed by fertile fields and bustling trade routes. Word spreads of Midas's unexpected inheritance of the throne. Some say it was a quick shift of power following his father's sudden passing, while others whisper about crafty palace intrigue. Either way, you can imagine him seated on a simple wooden stool among a circle of advisors, each of them more eager than the last to steer the new king's decisions. At first, Midas barely stands out, still that quiet soul who used to sneak off to frolic with donkeys in the countryside. But leadership demands a certain performance, and Midas soon learns he must display strength and vision, or risk being overshadowed by older, more cunning courtiers. In the swirl of politics, the donkey obsession doesn't vanish. If anything, it takes on a curious shape in Midas's rule. While most monarchs might amass fine horses for their royal stables, Midas's stables are rumored to be brimming with donkeys, some from local breeders, others acquired via distant trade routes. Around the palace, you might catch glimpses of stable hands attempting to train these ordinarily stubborn animals to march with dignity. Occasionally, they succeed, while often the donkeys have their own comedic ideas, braying at inopportune moments or refusing to budge from the palace gardens. It's not exactly the regal spectacle you'd expect from a royal stable, but Midas seems oddly pleased by it all. Meanwhile, wealth flows into the kingdom. A mainstream historical fact in the 8th century BCE, Phrygia enjoyed a golden age of sorts, thriving on trade along routes that connected the Aegean world with the East. Artisans excelled in metalwork, producing intricate bronze vessels and finely crafted jewelry. Seated on a carved throne in his megaron, the grand hall of the palace, Midas would preside over lavish banquets, receiving precious gifts from ambassadors who arrived laden with offerings. Golden bowls, shimmering textiles, and exotic spices flowed into the royal treasury. Watching this accumulation of splendor might have stirred something in Midas that lay dormant through his boyhood, a hunger for more, a fascination with the sheen of wealth that sparkled as brilliantly as the sun. Stories tell us of how the so-called golden touch entered the picture. One common version has it that Midas showed hospitality to a wandering satyr, a friend of the god Dionysus, offering him food and drink when others would have turned him away. In gratitude, Dionysus granted Midas a wish. Perhaps Midas was overwhelmed by the abundance around him, or maybe he was simply naive. He asked for the power to turn anything he touched into gold. It's easy to see how that might sound like the perfect dream. Instant treasure with a single tap of the fingertips. Yet we know how the story goes. This boon soon turned nightmarish, as Midas's food, drink, and even his beloved donkey friends threatened to become lifeless lumps of gold under his hands. Here's a quick comedic aside. Imagine the donkey's panicked expression the instant Midas's finger accidentally brushes its bristly mane. A moment of donkey delight quickly overshadowed by the potential for a 24-carat donkey statue. Not exactly a great palace pet anymore, is it? Though the Golden Touch fiasco stands as Midas's most famous misadventure, in this telling, it intertwines with his donkey fixation in amusing ways. He tries to greet his stable full of donkey companions one morning, only to realize he can't reach out affectionately without dooming them to a glittering, inert fate. The horror on his face? Perhaps he instructs the stable hands to be extremely careful, wearing gloves or orchestrating bizarre donkey maneuvers just so he can feed them without direct contact. Despite the comedic undertones, you can sense the heartbreak. Midas's dream of living in perfect donkey-filled harmony is about to unravel in a swirl of gold dust. A quirky tidbit emerges here: donkey milk, in some corners of the ancient world, was believed to have miraculous cosmetic properties. Cleopatra famously bathed in it, or so the tales say. Maybe Midas, in a desperate attempt to salvage his donkey obsession, invests in a side venture: donkey milk production, hoping the animals could still serve the kingdom without being turned into gold lumps at his accidental touch. Who knows? The palace corridors might smell faintly of fresh milk and honey, an odd combination of wealth and agrarian charm. If you find yourself chuckling, it's understandable. The mental image of Midas carefully negotiating donkey milking schedules while trying not to accidentally tap the donkey with his gold, inflicting fingertips, is downright slapstick. But the comedic facade soon cracks. Growing wealth, unstoppable greed, and the donkey mania swirl together, culminating in an odd synergy that, ironically, alienates Midas from both the splendors of a normal feast and the simple joys of donkey companionship. He cannot eat a single grape or sip a drop of water, and worse yet, he can't even pat the donkey's neck in comfort. Those braying beasts he once adored now fill him with dread. Each day, he edges closer to genuine desperation, perhaps tiptoeing around the palace with his arms tucked behind his back, determined to avoid brushing against anything or anyone. It's a lonely, gilded existence. In modern terms, you might compare his plight to a billionaire who's acquired so many possessions that he can't truly enjoy them. Historians still argue whether the fable of the golden touch was grafted onto Midas's historical persona to emphasize the moral about greed. After all, the donkey obsession alone might have been comedic, but insufficient as a morality tale. And yet, here we see how these elements collide, shaping the bizarre tapestry of Midas's legend. Each donkey bray in the courtyard might feel like a mocking echo, reminding him of the innocence he's lost to material desire. Desperate for relief, Midas prays to Dionysus. Legend holds that the wine god, softening at Midas's pleas, instructs him to bathe in a sacred river. Some say it was the Pactolus, where the curse would wash away. This sets the stage for the redemption that we'll explore soon enough. But for now, you sense Midas is teetering on the brink of madness. His nights are restless, haunted by the memory of nearly transforming his beloved donkey into a gleaming statue. More comedic jabs bubble up. Picture Midas yelping each time he trips over a golden dish, or tries to open a wooden door, only to find it instantly changed to gold, jammed and useless. The palace staff might be tiptoeing around corners, stifling nervous giggles, yet underlying the humor is a genuine lesson: the precarious balance between appreciating the comforts around us and being consumed by the desire for more. There's an irony in Midas's predicament, especially given his earlier years. Once a boy who found simple delight in a donkey's bray, he's now a king who literally can't share a warm moment with another living creature without risking petrifying them into gold. His donkey obsession, so innocent before, merges with and magnifies the tragedy of his golden touch. And so, in your gentle nighttime journey, you follow him through the palace corridors as he carefully skirts around furniture, tries to eat with utensils that end up becoming solid gold, and glances longingly out the window at the donkey stables. You can almost hear the muffled braying drifting into the hall, a bittersweet soundtrack to Midas's woe. The comedic notes don't vanish, they just gain a layer of pathos. Sometimes the strangest curses begin in the simplest desires. For Midas, the lure of limitless gold collides with his donkey fascination, forging a cautionary tale that resonates through centuries like the ringing of a golden coin dropping to the floor. In the early morning hush, you drift through the palace where Midas, now free from the horrors of the golden touch, breathes a sigh of relief, but only temporarily. The entire kingdom settles back into a routine that once felt normal. Feasting without fear of turning plates to gold, stables teeming with happy, non-metallic donkeys, and Midas himself tentatively rediscovering the joy of human contact. Life could have resumed a pleasant rhythm, had it not been for the next twist in the tapestry, a fateful musical dispute, sowing seeds that will soon sprout donkey ears atop the royal brow. It all begins when a group of traveling performers announces a grand celebration in honor of the god Pan, a mischievous deity who plays pipes made of reeds and lures shepherds and nymphs into wild dances in the countryside. The festival is set in a lush grove near a clear running stream, Rumor has it that Pan, emboldened by the adoration of the crowd, begins to boast that his rustic music surpasses even the sublime strains of Apollo's lyre. Such arrogance never goes unnoticed on Mount Olympus. Sure enough, word reaches Apollo, the golden-haired god of music, healing and prophecy, who decides to make an appearance on Earth to settle the matter once and for all. Imagine the hush that falls over the festival when Apollo descends. Sunlight glints off his lyre strings like liquid flame, and his gaze alone seems to still the breeze. If you were standing there, you might feel your pulse quicken. This isn't just any traveler strolling up to the reed-covered stage. Pan, for his part, appears unfazed, confident that his jovial tunes can sway even a god's ears. And, caught somewhere in the middle, you notice King Midas, perhaps drawn by curiosity or by that old donkey-inspired sense of mischief. He stands at the edge of the gathering, enthralled by the spectacle. Historians still argue whether this particular contest is a later addition to Midas's lore, spun by bards who loved weaving comedic moral lessons into their stories. The mainstream historical fact is that musical contests indeed played a big role in Greek culture. Festivals like the Pythian Games in Delphi featured performances that venerated Apollo, and judges were often local dignitaries or priests. In Midas's case, though, the myth says he was personally chosen Ella, or he volunteered to judge this face-off between Pan and Apollo. Perhaps no one else dared to weigh in on such a cosmic rivalry. Or perhaps Midas's reputation for eccentric tastes made him seem like a neutral party. Either way, when Apollo calls for a mortal verdict, it is Midas who steps forward. Let the showdown commence. Pan plays first. His pipes fill the grove with earthy, playful notes that make your feet itch to dance. The music is lively, rowdy at times, conjuring images of goats prancing through meadows and shepherds hollering across the hills. Pan smirks confidently as the crowd taps their toes, giggles, and breaks into spontaneous clapping. The performance ends on a raucous note that echoes among the tall cypress trees. Then Apollo takes the stage with his lyre. He plucks the strings, and the air seems to shimmer. A hush falls. It's a melody that calls to mind sun-kissed mountaintops, the hush of dawn, and the graceful arcs of flamingo, pink clouds. It's both delicate and grand, a show of mastery that leaves many spectators in quiet tears. Even Pan's cocky grin fades for a moment, replaced by a twinge of envy. At the end of the performances, applause erupts from the crowd. But who prevails? By all mortal ears, Apollo's music is beyond compare. Yet King Midas, who might have partaken in too many donkey shenanigans to fully appreciate high art, declares Pan the victor. Pan cackles in delight, while the crowd stares, wide-eyed, presumably thinking Midas must be off his rocker, or at least tone-deaf. As for Apollo, the flicker of annoyance in his eyes is enough to send a tremor through the earth beneath your feet. Sorely. You think Midas has just invited trouble, and you'd be right. Apollo steps forward, a sharp smile curving across his lips. He points at Midas with a regal sweep of his hand. Some versions say the god merely frowns. Others have him speak in a voice that rattles the sky. If you prefer the braying of a goat to the beauty of the lyre, perhaps you have the ears of a beast. In that moment, Midas feels a curious tingling on either side of his head, and before he can protest, soft fur sprouts where human skin once was. His ears elongate, creeping upward in an unmistakable donkey shape. A comedic jab. That moment when the Donkey King goes from donkey enthusiast to donkey impersonator. Talk about living the brand. Suddenly, Midas's cap is too small. The crowd gasps, and Pan's laughter turns uneasy. Even the donkey stable back at the palace might be quietly braying in cosmic sympathy at this horrifying new look. Your second comedic aside might be imagining Midas fumbling with different hats, trying to find one wide enough to hide these donkey ears. A flattering turban, a massive helmet, so many new fashion challenges. Fringy side note: in some tiny pockets of ancient Greek society, there was a bizarre superstition that donkey ears could grant you the power to hear the gods' whispers. A gift for prophecy of sorts. Perhaps that rumor, that fringe tidbit, is an ironic echo of what's just happened to Midas. Now, with donkey ears, he can't unhear the mocking brays of those around him, even if they speak in hushed tones. The comedic potential is there, but for poor Midas, it's far from funny. Shame floods him. This king, once so proud of his donkey mania, now wears its humiliating symbol on his own head. Rushing away from the grove, he tries desperately to cover his new ears, but the moment he returns to the palace, the staff can't help noticing. Donkeys bray in their pens, as if greeting their new, long-eared master with open arms, open hooves. Midas locks himself in his private chambers, feeling a terrible sense of cosmic justice. Perhaps his donkey obsession was a light-hearted quirk before, but now it's something deeper, a humiliating brand that underlines his flawed judgment. Cue your third comedic twist. Imagine Midas ordering a special line of donkey, ear-friendly crowns, only to have the royal jeweler politely ask for the king's exact ear measurements. Over time, Midas tries to live life as normal, though it's anything but. The donkey ears quiver when he's embarrassed, prick up when he's startled, and are impossible to hide with even the most luxurious regal headwear. In hushed corners, rumors multiply. Servants whisper that their king has been cursed, that the gods have marked him as an example of mortal folly. Midas's donkey mania, once private and almost cute, becomes public fodder for scandalous gossip. Eventually, to keep the peace, Midas threatens severe punishment for anyone caught making fun of his predicament. But that doesn't stop giggles from echoing in dark corridors. If you roam the city streets at night, you'll hear the murmurs behind closed doors, watchers at the gates exchanging rumors. Did you see them poke out from his turban today? Someone might whisper. He brushed by me, and I swear I heard them wiggle. Midas, already a cautious figure after the Golden Touch fiasco, now becomes even more reclusive, restricting public appearances. He claims an ailment requires rest. Officially, the kingdom's scribes proclaim that the king's unusual attire is a spiritual vow, perhaps an offering to an obscure donkey deity that he's worshipped since boyhood. A little comedic PR spin to quell suspicion. Still, the deeper truth remains Midas's ill-judged vote in a divine musical contest has earned him an embarrassing curse. How, if ever, will he move forward? Late at night, he paces his bedchamber, donkey ears flicking at every subtle sound, pondering ways to appease Apollo. Your heart might soften a bit, thinking of this poor, self-conscious king. Sure, his choice was foolish, but the punishment is oh so spectacularly ironic. Yet, ironically, the donkey ears only amplify his fascination with these creatures. He hears their braying in a new, more profound manner, as though he shares their voice. There's a strange, reluctant kinship forming, even if it's coated in shame and frustration. Perhaps Midas stands by the stable fence at twilight, donkey ears peeking from under a hood, simply observing his old friends. He wonders if they sense the transformation, or if they merely see him as another two-legged caretaker. If life's weird twists have taught him anything, it's that humility might lie somewhere in learning from these animals he both loves and now, in a way, resembles. All around the palace, a strange hush settles in. Where once people bustled with lively conversation and laughter, now it's as if every footstep is accompanied by a worried glance over the shoulder. You notice the servants whispering, their voices barely above a hush. Even Midas's advisors tread softly, as though speaking too loudly might somehow exacerbate the curse that's just befallen their king. And there, pacing the marble corridors with a cloak wrapped awkwardly around his head, is Midas, two donkey ears twitching beneath the fabric whenever a loud noise startles him. Sooner or later, of course, the secret slips out. One morning, a palace chamberlain, assigned the simple chore of delivering fresh linens, gets an unexpected glimpse of those tall, furry ears poking out from beneath Midas's hastily adjusted hood. The chamberlain nearly drops the linens in shock. Maybe they let out an involuntary squeak before bolting from the room, heart racing faster than a spooked donkey. By sundown, hushed rumors flutter like leaves in a summer breeze. The king has donkey ears. Depending on which servant you overhear, the story might sound comedic, sinister, or even downright mythical. Each retelling grows more fanciful than the last. Some say the ears measure 2 feet in length. Others claim Midas can now speak fluent donkey language in addition to Greek. News spreads through the city at a pace that would rival a donkey's bray echoing down a canyon. A comedic aside, you can picture the palace guards attempting to set up air inspections. But that might be going too far. The populace, equal parts curious and afraid, grapples with the meaning of this transformation. Meanwhile, the donkey stables remain a favorite place for Midas to retreat, ironic as it might be. Because at least there, he feels less judged. What unsettles the kingdom most is not just that Midas has the ears of a donkey, but that a god inflicted this upon him. Historically, many Greek city-states believed the gods intervened in mortal affairs to highlight moral lessons or punish hubris. A mainstream historical fact, inscriptions and temple decorations often depicted mortals being chastised by gods, reinforcing the idea that divine beings wielded power over every aspect of human life, from weather patterns to personal vanity. For the people of Midas's realm, this donkey ear phenomenon might represent divine displeasure. They wonder what their king could have done to offend Apollo, a god known for his love of music and clarity. Did Midas truly prefer the raucous pipes of Pan over the refined notes of Apollo's lyre? The rumor mill churns, fueling both pity and scorn. Yet, despite the shock factor, a quirky or fringed tidbit emerges from corners of the palace. Some folks spin a bizarre explanation that donkey ears actually harness cosmic vibrations, allowing Midas to hear distant, heavenly music. It's not exactly widespread dogma, but it's the kind of comforting story certain courtiers might cling to, hoping to give the king's predicament a nobler sheen. Perhaps a handful of them even whisper among themselves that Midas is now more attuned to Pan's wild pipes than ever, forging a deeper bond with the mischievous deity. Whether Midas himself takes comfort in such tales is unknown. He mostly just wants to hide his ears and avoid public appearances at all costs. One evening, you follow Midas as he tries to remain inconspicuous in the darkened halls. He wears a large, flowing turban that completely covers his head, though the bulges on either side are unmistakable. Each time he hears a guard's footsteps echoing down the corridor, he ducks behind a pillar or statue, pressing himself against the cold stone. His breath comes in quick, shallow gasps, equal parts embarrassment and dread. The palace, once a place he roamed freely, now feels like a maze of prying eyes. Still, daily matters of the kingdom beckon, requiring an appearance. Midas summons the nerve to sit at the throne for an audience with local farmers. He listens to their complaints about a new tax on olive oil, nodding politely, donkey ears twitching behind his heavy headdress whenever a voice grows too loud. A comedic note, you catch him almost scratching his ear through the fabric. Realizing mid-motion how ridiculous that would look, then pulling his hand away in a fluster. The farmers bow, carefully averting their gaze, but you can sense their alarm. Whispers about those hidden ears ripple through the palace halls, merging with the general unease. Even if no one dares to say it to his face, the kingdom collectively braces for what might come next. After all, if the gods have cursed their king once, is more punishment on the horizon. Meanwhile, Midas's personal servants tiptoe around his mood. They lay out a series of head coverings, each designed to conceal the ears as inconspicuously as possible. One might be a tall Phrygian cap. Ironically, donkey-eared hats already exist in comedic plays of the era, making Midas's predicament feel like a real-life farce. Another is a broad circular hat that flops awkwardly, threatening to reveal the tips of his ears if he moves too quickly. Midas, frustrated, tries them all. None feels quite right. Some slip off, others trap heat, and each day ends with Midas dabbing sweat from his brow, cursing the odd shape that's become his new reality. Naturally, the donkey stable workers find it impossible not to snicker, if only behind closed doors. The man once known for championing donkey care above all else now literally wears their trademark feature. In a comedic twist, you might imagine Midas sneaking into the stable at night, quietly communing with the animals. Maybe he lingers by their pens, donkey ears pricking forward as the creatures bray softly. He might find a strange solace in that midnight solitude, hearing the donkey calls more vividly than ever, each bray resonating in his newly attuned ears. Part of him may suspect there's a lesson in all this, a push toward empathy, humility, or some cosmic inside joke from the gods. He can't hide forever, though. Eventually, the donkey ears become an elephant in the room. Well, donkey in the room. Historians still argue whether such a tale was a direct satire of real Phrygian rulers, suggesting they lacked cultural refinement, or simply a widely enjoyed myth about the consequences of slighting the Greek gods. Regardless, the effect on Midas's reputation is swift and undeniable. Where once he was known for the Golden Touch fiasco, now he's the king with donkey ears, inspiring comedic sketches on pottery or whispered gossip in the public baths. If a traveling bard wanted easy material, Midas's donkey ears provided comedic gold. And so, Midas's life adapts to its new normal. He orchestrates courtly events so that most occur in dimly lit halls, a tactic to conceal the outline of his ears under shadow. He instructs the palace harpists and flutists to keep their melodies subdued, perhaps fearing that overtly fine music might summon Apollo's attention again. Or worse, and that it might provoke some further curse. And the people, they go about their daily tasks, though with an undercurrent of tension. Each day, rumors spread of how Midas's ears might change the kingdom's fortune. One group of superstitious farmers might think donkey ears bring a curse on the harvest, while others claim it's a sign of Pan's blessing. Fingers crossed for bountiful goat herds, donkey births, or something equally whimsical. There's no shortage of theories. It's a lonely predicament, and your heart goes out to the king, who, once a boy softly stroking donkey manes in a countryside orchard, now feels ashamed even to step outside his chambers. A comedic part of you might recall how he'd once revered these animals, never dreaming he'd end up sharing their most distinctive feature. And yet, even in this comedic turn of fate, there might be a silver lining. Sometimes, curses in mythic tales transform a person's perspective, teaching them compassion, introspection, or humility. As the moonlight streams through a palace window, you glimpse Midas seated at a desk, writing by lamplight, perhaps drafting a humble apology to Apollo, or a letter of confession to a trusted ally. The donkey ears flick when a breeze ruffles the parchment, a subtle reminder that, for better or worse, this is his reality now. Even though Midas's donkey ears have emerged in dramatic fashion, the kingdom doesn't collapse. Life continues, albeit with a dash of comedic gossip. Most people have their own problems. Crops to tend, families to feed. As you drift through the city under the starry sky, you might overhear muffled laughter behind closed doors, jokes about the donkey-eared king. But then again, the same folk might offer a small prayer for Midas's well-being, knowing full well the gods can be capricious. And so you keep walking, letting the quiet hush soothe you, the faint echoes of donkey brays weaving into your thoughts, like a lullaby with a playful punchline. You weave your way through the palace's dimly lit corridors, where you can almost feel the tension in the air like an electric current. Light from oil lamps dances on the walls, illuminating hushed figures who slip in and out of shadow. Despite Midas's desperate attempts to keep his donkey ears a private matter, you hear the telltale snatches of whispered gossip. They say his turban shifted when he sneezed. Or you could see them twitching if you stood at just the right angle. Such rumors spread faster than a donkey's bray echoes in an empty courtyard. Servants huddle in corners, leaning in close so that even the echoes of their murmurs remain faint. Yet, no matter how quiet they are, each whispered remark seems to find its way back to another ear. The entire palace becomes a labyrinth of small secrets, each corridor hiding a handful of rumors. Where once the staff bustled happily among themselves, now you see them glancing at doorways, listening for footsteps, fearful of being caught discussing the king's predicament. Some can't resist sharing comedic exaggerations. One claims that Midas's ears are so long he needs to duck through doorways. Another jokes that a palace cat batted at one of them, thinking it was a dangling toy. You can't help but crack a small grin at the absurdity. These rumors, like a creeping vine, soon wend their way into the city outside the palace gates. Merchants gossip with travelers, blacksmiths murmur with passing soldiers, and the donkey-eared king's story becomes a source of both fascination and mockery. Yet, the official line from the palace remains ambiguous. Posters on city walls depict Midas in profile, turban intact, proclaiming him favored by the gods. You notice that nowhere do these posters mention donkey ears. A comedic aside apparently, the court artists tried doing a version with donkey ears just to see if it looked heroic, and quickly realized that was never going to pass muster. At times, you hear the swirl of contradictory opinions. Some older council members insist the donkey ears are proof that Midas is a direct channel to the realm of Pan, thereby making him more in tune with nature. Others, especially those with strong Apollo loyalties, see the ears as a curse. The gods have made him a laughingstock, they say in hushed disapproval. A mainstream historical fact, in many real Greek polis, public image was everything. Rulers relied on displays of piety, elaborate festivals, and architectural wonders to showcase divine favor. If the people believed their king was cursed, it could destabilize the delicate faith that held society together. No wonder Midas tries with all his might to hide those ears behind the most sumptuous fabrics he can find. Stepping deeper into the palace, you come upon the marble courtyard, where courtiers and advisors gather around a small ornamental pool. Statues of nymphs and satyrs decorate the perimeter, and water gently trickles from a carved lion's mouth. It's a seemingly tranquil scene, but tension ripples beneath the surface. Here, nobles and visiting dignitaries mingle, exchanging polite greetings with forced smiles. An ambassador from a neighboring state attempts to show respect by bowing low before Midas, but you catch the flash of curiosity in their eyes, trying, perhaps, to see if the turban hides something truly donkey-like. Midas stiffens and raises a hand in a gesture of formal greeting, but the flick of a donkey ear beneath that fabric nearly sends the turban lurching to one side. You feel the entire courtyard hold its breath for a moment, eyes widening in collective astonishment. Moments like these confirm that Midas cannot keep his secret forever. Nevertheless, the king doubles down on caution, carefully controlling who enters his throne room. Some courtiers claim the donkey ears are the result of an exotic skin condition, an explanation as flimsy as papyrus in a rainstorm. Others suspect a cunning political ploy, some brand new alliance with a donkey-worshipping cult. Perhaps a quirky tidbit: donkey worship, in certain fringe sects, was not unheard of in the ancient Mediterranean. The donkey, symbolizing both fertility and comical stubbornness, had pockets of devotees here and there, yet even these worshippers probably never imagined a literal donkey-eared monarch. When they hear the rumors, they might wonder if Midas is their newly anointed prophet, or simply a cautionary tale of too much donkey-loving gone wrong. The gossip takes on an almost theatrical flair when you happen upon a group of the king's scribes debating the theological ramifications. One scribe suggests that Midas is paying off some karmic debt for insulting Apollo. Another shakes their head, claiming that donkey ears must be a sign that Pan has chosen Midas as a champion. Yet a third voice interjects the open scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether this entire donkey ear incident was a literal curse, an allegorical lesson, or just comedic propaganda meant to ridicule a flawed ruler. Despite their differences, all agree that the affair has turned the kingdom's court into a stage where every whisper matters and every rumor is amplified by fear. One day, you catch Midas conferring with a trusted advisor in a secluded corridor. He tugs off the turban for just a moment, letting his ears breathe, and you see the frustration etched into his features. He speaks in a subdued tone. "It's only a matter of time before all my subjects know." His advisor, fidgeting nervously, suggests a discreet religious offering, perhaps a midnight sacrifice to Apollo or a heartfelt apology. Midas scoffs, recalling how his musical verdict led to this fiasco. Another comedic jab. "I'd ask Pan for help." Midas mutters, "But with my luck, he'd just make me sprout a tail." Even the donkey stable, once Midas's sanctuary, becomes tricky to visit. He worries that the stable hands might catch him in a private moment, ears fully exposed. Late at night, you can imagine him creeping through a side passage, lantern in hand, entering the stable quietly to stroke the muzzle of his favorite donkey. In that nearly silent space, donkey ears flicker in the darkness. Both the kings and the animals. It's a surreal sight, a man seeking comfort from the very creatures whose traits he now shares. For a few moments, the hush is broken only by the soft rustle of hay and the donkey's gentle breathing. Perhaps, in these stolen visits, Midas finds a fleeting sense of connection. After all, he's always been drawn to these animals, and now they feel both like confidence and a daily reminder of his curse. Outside the palace, life carries on. Merchants bargain in the market, farmers haul produce to the gates, and donkey caravans still clop down dusty roads. Yet the more people talk, the more they fixate on Midas's donkey ears as a sign, a portent, a comedic slip by the gods. It's not that they don't have their own problems, droughts, taxes, occasional bandits, but the donkey-eared king is simply too peculiar to ignore. Bits of donkey humor creep into everyday conversation, almost a coping mechanism. Townsfolk crack jokes about long-eared decisions, or warn children that Apollo might curse you if you don't practice your singing. The donkey mania that once seemed like Midas's private quirk is now public domain, swirling in comedic retellings and hushed speculation. And what about Midas himself? Each sunrise seems to bring a new layer of dread. He wears his ornate coverings, tries to maintain an air of regal poise, and silently pleads for a solution. A comedic image, the royal tailor, measuring ear circumference for a custom-fitting hat, all while Midas stands there, arms crossed, mortified. In the quiet of evening, the king might flip through scrolls in the palace library, scanning for references to reversing curses. He might question if the donkey ears will vanish after some atonement, or if he's stuck with them for life. If the golden touch taught him anything, it's that curses can be undone if the gods are appeased. The question is, how? For now, the whispers echo louder than any official decree, building a tension that can only break with some drastic action. You can practically taste the anticipation in the palace air. Something is about to crack. Either Midas's patience will snap, or someone will betray the secret in a way that can't be contained. As you wander these corridors, you can almost see the donkey-eared silhouette looming large in every tapestry reflection and every polished floor tile. The hush is thick with rumor, the atmosphere loaded with comedic suspense. One thing is certain: the next chapter of Midas's donkey-eared saga will unfold in spectacular, and possibly hilarious, fashion. You wander into the subdued bustle of a palace courtyard just before dawn, a faint glow edging the horizon. Though a hush blankets the corridors, tension thrums beneath the silence. Everyone knows Midas wears donkey ears beneath those extravagant head wraps. Yet, officially, nothing is amiss. The secret, it seems, is hidden in plain sight. High-ranking courtiers tiptoe around the topic, focusing on their daily tasks. Servants scurry past, heads down, as though an accidental glance might give them away. You feel the collective strain, as if the kingdom itself is teetering between pretending everything is normal and bursting out in hysterical laughter. It's in moments like this, your senses sharpen. You notice how the guards at the palace gate exchange quick, knowing looks. One might lift an eyebrow, wordlessly conveying, "Have you seen them today?" The other guard shrugs, as if to say, "Same as ever, but hush." Meanwhile, in the airy colonnade, clusters of visiting dignitaries pretend to admire the architecture, but you catch them shooting sidelong glances at Midas whenever he passes. Comedic aside, it's like when someone's trying really hard not to stare at the giant piece of lettuce stuck in your teeth. But in this case, it's donkey ears and a flashy turban, so subtlety flies right out the window. Midas, for his part, attempts a dignified stride, head held high, turban carefully pinned. Yet you see the edges of his donkey ears nudging against the fabric. Each time a donkey brays in the nearby stables, his ears give an involuntary twitch that sends a ripple through the cloth. And yes, a few onlookers stifle grins or cough into their sleeves. But no one addresses the phenomenon directly, almost as if they've agreed, collectively and silently, to pretend the donkey ears don't exist. In a way, it's become a kingdom-wide theatrical performance. Yet, invisible truths have a habit of surfacing when least expected. Take the story of Midas's own barber, an unassuming fellow who's sworn to secrecy under threat of royal wrath. He's the only person who regularly sees the king, without his elaborate headgear, called in to trim around those furry protrusions to keep them tidy. The poor barber's nerves must be perpetually shot, fumbling with scissors, trying not to poke the king's sensitive ears, and always mindful that a single slip of the tongue could mean severe consequences. Late one night, you pass by the door of the barber's modest quarters and hear him pacing, muttering his troubles under his breath. He's desperate to tell someone, anyone, about the donkey ears, if only to unburden himself, but he keeps the secret locked in his mind. Or does he? Historians still argue whether the story of Midas's barber originated as an oral tradition to highlight that secrets, no matter how fearsome, cannot remain buried forever. A mainstream historical fact. In many Greek and Anatolian societies, barbers were often confidants and message bearers, privy to the hidden concerns of royals and nobles. Some ironically served as informal counselors, hearing everything from casual gossip to state secrets. That Midas's fate might hinge on a lowly barber underscores how each cog in this grand royal machine can play a pivotal role, especially when donkey ears are involved. Imagine the barber creeping beyond city walls at dawn, breath hitching as he steals through a field of tall reeds. Perhaps he's trembling with the strain of secrecy. In some tellings of the myth, he crouches beside the reeds and whispers, "King Midas has donkey ears, King Midas has donkey ears," just to relieve the burden. Then, legend goes, the wind that rustles the reeds eventually carries the words far and wide, so that passers-by hear the phrase repeated by the whistling storks. Whether it's a literal phenomenon or a poetic allegory for how rumors spread, the tale suggests that once a secret is uttered, even to nature, it's no longer safe. Meanwhile, back in the palace, Midas senses the tension mounting but can't pinpoint its origin. He writes new edicts, hoping to distract the populace with improvements to city infrastructure. He announces the construction of a new aqueduct, to be built using advanced stonework techniques learned from traveling engineers. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some ancient aqueduct designs were so efficient that they remained in use centuries later, a testament to old-world ingenuity. Midas hopes that by offering practical benefits, he'll keep the people's minds away from donkey-themed gossip. Yet the excitement of new water channels can't fully overshadow the donkey ears that loom in the public's imagination. At midday, the king hosts a small gathering of local chieftains in a sunlit courtyard. Platters of fruit, olives, and goat cheese adorn a marble table. A bard strums a lyre softly in the background. No grand anthems to risk provoking Apollo's ire again. You watch as Midas tries to engage them in conversation about farmland yields and trade routes. But you see the guests, ever so discreetly, letting their gazes dart to the sides of his turban. Comedic aside, it's reminiscent of trying to talk to someone with giant turkey feathers sticking out of their baseball cap. No matter how polite you are, your eyes are drawn to the spectacle. The donkey ears remain that quiet spectacle no one dares name. Afterward, Midas paces in his private chambers, donkey ears twitching behind closed doors, frustration gnawing at him. He's well aware that, secret in plain sight, can't last forever. If the rumor mill churns too violently, it could undermine his authority. After all, a king cursed by the gods is hardly a beacon of stability. The donkey mania that once seemed like a private quirk is now an unspoken predicament for the entire kingdom. Perhaps Midas wonders if continuing to hide is more shameful than simply stepping forward and admitting the truth. but pride, shame, and the memory of Apollo's displeasure war for dominance in his mind. He can't risk drawing further divine scorn, nor can he easily confess his failure to the masses. So he remains silent, letting the invisible truth remain stuck between the lines of official discourse. Of course, no mythic predicament is complete without the comedic cameo of Pan, the very figure who helped spur Apollo's wrath in the first place. On a moonlit night, rumor says Pan is spotted dancing in the outskirts of the kingdom, piping a raucous tune for revelers. Midas hears of this, but whether he's tempted to meet Pan again is unclear. One might wonder, does he harbor resentment toward the mischievous god, or does he still prefer Pan's earthy music to Apollo's refined lyric? Another comedic jab: if Midas were to attend one of Pan's wild revels, how would he keep his ears tucked under that turban with all the dancing and leaping? It's a cringe-worthy mental image, donkey ears flopping to the beat. Beyond the palace walls, life churns on as usual. Grain markets, donkey caravans, traveling tropes of performers. Yet every so often, you catch a snippet of conversation that reveals just how widespread the rumor has become. Two fishermen by the docks might exchange a laugh over that donkey-eared king, or a traveling merchant from Corinth might demand an audience with Midas just for the chance to see the ears for himself. The palace tries to manage the press by limiting audience requests, but the demand remains. Secrets taste sweetest when they're right there, hiding in plain sight. As the day wanes, you sense the hush thickening again. The barber remains anxious in his quarters, possibly rehearsing how to feign ignorance if questioned. Advisors scroll through the palace's daily bulletins, crossing out any mention of donkey ears. And Midas, perhaps he stands on a balcony, gazing out over his city, donkey ears pressing into the evening breeze, collecting the distant hum of the streets below. He wonders what the future holds, aware that illusions of normalcy can't last forever. In the hush, he might recall the absolute relief he once felt after ridding himself of the golden touch. Now, he silently prays for a similar moment of deliverance, even though part of him suspects that a secret this large can't be quietly undone, especially when it's lived right on top of his head, in plain sight for anyone bold enough to peek beneath the turban. You slip down a back corridor of the palace, keeping to the shadows as best you can, following the faint shuffle of anxious footsteps. There, around a corner, you find Midas, shoulders tense, donkey ears tucked beneath a hastily wound turban, quietly conferring with two of his most trusted advisors. A single torch sputters nearby, throwing dancing light on the trio's worried faces. The air is thick with desperation, and you pick up fragments of their hushed conversation. There must be a shrine or a priest, someone who knows how to lift this curse. Could we petition Apollo directly? Another offering, and risk angering him further. King Midas can't appear at his temple with donkey ears on display. You sense the depth of Midas's predicament. He's tried to keep calm amid swirling rumors, but now the illusions are breaking down. Each day brings fresh whispers, and the donkey ears aren't fading on their own. The only hope, it seems, is to undertake some drastic measure, a hush journey, a secret offering, anything that might convince a god or goddess to lift this humiliating transformation. The tension in Midas's voice resonates across the corridor. You might even see the occasional flick of an ear through the folds of fabric whenever his anxiety spikes, almost as if the curse itself is mocking him. After the advisors leave, Midas hesitates in the half-light. Then he glances your way, as though realizing that any ally, even a silent observer in the shadows, might offer some comfort. Soon, a plan emerges. He'll slip away from the palace under cover of darkness, traveling to a secluded temple rumored to house an oracle known for unorthodox solutions. Imagine everything from goat sacrifices to odd-smelling potions. A comedic aside, let's hope that weird donkey ear transfusion is not on the menu. Night falls, and Midas sets out with a small escort of hand-picked guards, each sworn to secrecy. They ride along winding roads, skirting the outskirts of villages where simple folk doze behind shuttered windows. It's the kind of journey you undertake when the stakes are high, but the embarrassment is higher. As the moon paints silver edges on the rugged hills, you notice Midas adjusting the hood draped over his donkey ears. He seems painfully aware that any slip could reveal him to a stray traveler. Yet the roads remain empty, save for distant howls of nocturnal animals and the rhythmic clop of donkey hooves. Yes, donkeys. What else would Midas choose as his nighttime transport? Horses are too conspicuous, or so he claims. A comedic mental image, donkey ears hidden under a hood, riding an actual donkey, donkey ears perked high. It's like donkey inception. They press on for hours, eventually arriving at a dimly lit sanctuary nestled among towering cypress trees. Flickering torches mark the temple's entrance, each flame dancing in a silent welcome. A carved inscription overhead suggests this place is dedicated to a minor deity, someone overshadowed by the Olympians yet rumored to have knowledge of hidden cures. You pass stone reliefs depicting half-animal figures, gleaning a sense that this temple might just be open to the donkey-eared among us. A quirky tidbit: across ancient Anatolia and the Greek world, there were indeed fringe cults that mixed worship of lesser-known deities with local animal veneration. Sometimes they accepted offerings from outcasts or those burdened by curses. It's precisely the sort of place Midas hopes to find a remedy. Inside, you catch your breath at the sight of walls lined with offerings, clay figurines, embroidered fabrics, and scribbled prayers. The air smells of incense and burning herbs, swirling in a hazy cloud around a modest altar. A lone priest steps forward, face partially obscured by the gloom. Midas's guards hold up their torches, revealing the king's covered head. You can feel the palpable tension as Midas carefully lifts his hood, exposing his donkey ears in the flickering light. The priest's eyes widen, not entirely surprised, but certainly intrigued. The stories are true. Then, he murmurs, historians still argue whether such backwater shrines truly existed to handle magical ailments, or if they were an invention of myth. A mainstream historical fact is that larger, more established oracles like Delphi often required strict protocols, and royals typically sought official channels for divine consultation. But smaller, more obscure sites sometimes catered to unusual requests away from prying eyes. This opens scholarly debate. Did these fringe temples offer genuine solutions, or were they mere folk superstition? Lingers in your mind as the priest begins his ritual. He gestures Midas closer, chanting a series of verses that echo through the temple's vaulted ceiling. You might hear fragments referencing donkey totems, mischief-making gods, and a plea for release from ill-considered judgments. Midas kneels, donkey ears bowed in humility. The priest circles him thrice, sprinkling a pungent mix of crushed herbs and wine. A comedic aside, you spot Midas scrunching his nose as the strong smell wafts upward, donkey ears flicking in mild protest. So much for maintaining an air of stoic dignity. Unfortunately, when the chanting subsides, you see no immediate change. The priest, brow furrowed, suggests that Midas perform a more challenging act of contrition, perhaps a pilgrimage to a place deemed holy by both Pan and Apollo, so he can beg forgiveness from both parties. He warns that until Midas reconciles with the cosmic forces he offended, those donkey ears may remain firmly in place. This is not the quick fix the king hoped for, but with no better option, he departs the temple at dawn, donkey ears still protruding, an uneasy mix of disappointment and resolve etched onto his face. Back on the road, you travel with Midas's small party as the sun rises. The morning rays illuminate rolling hills, wildflowers dancing in the breeze. Yet the scenery offers little comfort to Midas. The donkey ears have begun to itch under the turban after that incense bath, adding a layer of comedic misery. He instructs his guards to ride faster, eager to return to the palace before too many people spot them. Dust kicks up around the donkey's hooves, the entourage galloping onward in a spectacle that might look almost regal, if not for the hidden donkey ears bobbing along at the front. Upon reaching the palace gates, Midas slips inside as discreetly as possible. He retreats to his chambers, leaving instructions for the entire guard detail to remain silent about the night's escapade. At this point, you can't help but see the mounting pressure. He tried one temple, and it didn't magically fix everything. What's next? Will he attempt some contraption to flatten his ears? Commission an oracle from another region to proclaim him donkey-free? Or maybe, in a comedic last resort, he'll try to bribe a passing magician. The possibilities are endless, each sounding more desperate than the last. Days pass, and the hush around the palace intensifies. Midas continues to juggle the demands of ruling, hearing petitions from citizens, organizing that new aqueduct project, and steering trade negotiations. Yet there's a frenetic edge to his demeanor now, an undercurrent of panic. He issues orders for the construction of a secret chamber, a small underground sanctuary where he can pray to Pan and Apollo without prying eyes. Rumor has it he's stockpiling offerings, honey cakes, goat milk, donkey figurines carved from precious wood. Maybe he hopes a private ceremony away from the palace altars will appease the gods. Another comedic jab. Yes, let's keep piling up donkey trinkets. Surely that will fix the donkey ears. Still, the problem persists. No matter how many donkey figurines he collects, the ears remain. You watch as Midas grows more gaunt, sleepless nights etched in the lines around his eyes. You can practically see the strain pulling at him. donkey ears twitching with every faint noise. And yet there's a faint glimmer of determination in his gaze. If one approach fails, he'll try another. If Apollo refuses to listen, maybe Pan will intervene. If the priest at that minor shrine couldn't help, perhaps a journey to a more distant oracle might. With each passing day, the curse feels heavier, driving Midas toward more extreme measures. In the hush of a late evening, you sense Midas pacing the library with an armful of scrolls. He scours references to ancient cures, comparing them to the reality of donkey ears perched on his head. Occasionally, he slumps into a chair, burying his face in his hands. After all, how do you even begin to rid yourself of a god's punishment? The Golden Touch had a clear remedy, a sacred river bath. But donkey ears, that's a different category of bizarre. And so, Midas readies himself for the next step. Whatever that might be, determined that if there's a way to reverse this fate, he will find it. No matter how many donkey-laden altars, incense baths, or midnight rituals he must endure. An early morning stillness blankets the palace when the plan is finally hatched. You slip into the courtyard where Midas stands beneath a solitary olive tree, donkey ears hidden beneath a carefully draped hood. He looks pale, determined, and more than a little nervous. A few trusted guards gather around him, each holding gear for what promises to be a long journey. You can almost feel the unspoken question in the air: will this fringy pilgrimage be the key to ridding the king of his donkey ears? Or is it just another desperate gamble? No one says much, the hush is thick, as though speaking might invite more ill luck. You join the small party as they exit a discreet side gate of the palace, slipping into the winding streets before daybreak. Stone walls rise on either side, still cold from the night chill. Midas moves quickly, stepping around puddles and shadowy corners, clearly eager to leave the city behind before curious onlookers can guess he's gone. A comedic aside, you can picture him clutching his hood every time a stray cat darts by, half afraid it'll leap up and snag a twitching donkey ear. Soon, you pass beyond the city gates into open countryside. Dawn light breaks across rolling hills dotted with cypress trees and patches of wild lavender. The sweet fragrance mingles with the earthy scent of dew and soil, a peaceful contrast to the tension you sense in the group. Overhead, the sky warms to soft pink and gold, ironically reminiscent of the golden touch that once plagued Midas. You can't help but think that, if donkey ears could be turned into precious metal, Midas might find himself facing yet another bizarre predicament. At least this time, the world remains in its normal, non-gilded form. The royal guards speak in low tones about the route. You catch mention of a remote gorge in the mountains where a particular oracle is said to dwell, one who doesn't abide by the usual customs of Delphi or other well-known shrines. Instead, this oracle supposedly communes with minor woodland gods, lost nymphs, and half-forgotten deities. Some say her insights come in riddles, others say she only speaks at twilight, channeling the voices of rustling leaves. Historians still argue whether these cryptic oracles represented an underground network of renegade priestesses, or were simply local mystics who catered to travelers in need of unconventional solutions. Whatever the truth, Midas is willing to roll the dice. His donkey ears have left him little choice. As you travel deeper into the hinterlands, you notice the terrain grow rougher. The roads turn to rocky paths, winding along steep ravines where the wind whistles through gnarled pines. A mainstream historical fact, ancient roads connecting Greek and Anatolian cities often deteriorated the further they got from main trade routes, making remote pilgrimages both physically and mentally taxing. This is especially true for a king used to the comforts of palace life. Yet Midas presses on, even as his donkey stead tires on the uneven footing. A second comedic aside, you can't help but think that, of all mounts, a donkey is probably the best at navigating rocky trails. Though it might stop stubbornly from time to time, forcing Midas to give it a gentle nudge. Imagine the irony of donkey ears twitching atop a donkey's back, stumbling through goat trails. Days merge into a hazy routine of early morning departures and campfires at dusk. Midas's party keeps a low profile, avoiding towns and larger villages. When they must restock supplies, the guards do most of the bargaining while Midas lingers in the shadows. The fear is palpable if word spreads that the donkey-eared king is out searching for a cure. Opportunists or gossip mongers might swarm him. At one point, you overhear villagers discussing a king with animal ears, but they seem uncertain if it's more rumor than fact. Midas breathes a quiet sigh of relief, tightening his hood each time they pass people on the road. Eventually, you reach the base of a mountain range that looms like a jagged wall against the sky. Thick forests cover the lower slopes, and above them, bare rock faces gleam in the midday sun. This is the rumored domain of the cryptic oracle. Nestled somewhere high among the cliffs, a hidden sanctuary awaits, accessible only by a narrow trail that twists through towering pines and mossy boulders. The air grows cooler, scented with pine resin and distant waterfalls. A hush settles over the group again, as though the silent majesty of the surroundings demands reverence. You see Midas shiver, donkey ears quivering beneath the hood. Perhaps he senses you're close to something powerful, or maybe the wind at this altitude is just a bit too brisk for comfort. Near twilight on the third day in these mountains, you stumble upon a small clearing where a half-ruined stone arch stands among ancient pines. Vines drape over the structure, and your boots crunch on gravel that might once have been a courtyard. A flickering torch reveals faded carvings of dancing satyrs and nymphs, their stone faces chipped by centuries of weather. At the far end of this clearing lies an unassuming cave entrance, partially hidden by ferns and the tumbling roots of a giant oak. Here, rumor insists, the cryptic oracle awaits travelers seeking the impossible. The guards remain outside, forming a cautious perimeter, while Midas steels himself to enter. You follow him into the cave, the air immediately cooler and tinged with an earthy dampness. Stalactites hang from the ceiling like silent guardians, dripping water that echoes in the gloom. Your torchlight plays across the rock walls, revealing faint markings, spirals, handprints, and symbols reminiscent of ancient fertility cults. A quirky tidbit: some archaeologists believe that deep caves in the Mediterranean often served as early spiritual sites, long before formal temples were built, hosting rituals tied to the underworld and the mysteries of nature. Deeper in, you see a dim glow, and the tunnel widens into a small chamber, where a lone figure sits upon a stone ledge. She's draped in tattered robes, hair falling around her in twisting braids adorned with feathers, shells, and small bones. The cryptic oracle, you presume. Without looking up, she speaks, her voice resonating eerily against the cavern walls. You come far, king of the donkey ears, seeking answers or absolution. The question hangs in the air as Midas kneels, donkey ears drooping under his hood, a tangible sign of humility and shame. Her eyes flick to you, then to Midas's trembling hands. She beckons him closer, instructing him to remove his hood. Your pulse quickens as he hesitates, then slowly lifts the fabric, revealing those donkey ears in the flickering firelight. The oracle's gaze softens, and a faint smirk crosses her lips, as if she's seen far stranger sights in her time. She begins to speak in riddles, words that dance between Pan's domain and Apollo's wrath, hinting that Midas's only way forward is to confront both powers in a singular act of devotion. For though the donkey bray calls forth the laughter of Pan, she intones, the music of Apollo must also be honored, lest the donkey remain forever on your head. Midas listens intently, hands gripping the torch. You sense both fear and a glimmer of hope. At last, a dual offering to Pan and Apollo, performed in a place sacred to them both. The oracle's instructions are cryptic. She references a meadow where wildflowers bloom year-round, a hidden waterfall that echoes with laughter, a singing breeze that might merge Pan's melodies with Apollo's chords. Midas must go there, kneel upon the earth, and recite a plea that acknowledges his folly, praising Apollo's lyre while respecting Pan's wild revelry. Only then, suggests, might the donkey ears be undone. A comedic third aside: if a two-part worship ceremony is the only fix, you can't help but imagine the precarious dance Midas will have to perform. 1 part classical symphony, 1 part drunken goat festival. After all, pleasing two gods who loathe each other's musical tastes is no small feat. With the oracle's final words echoing in the cavern, something about letting your folly be the soil from which wisdom blooms. Midas bows, whispering his gratitude. Slowly he replaces his hood over those ears. The oracle slips back into a deep silence, leaving you to guide Midas out of the chamber, torch casting long shadows on the damp stone. Outside, dusk has blanketed the clearing, stars peeking through the canopy. The guards watch expectantly as you and Midas emerge, but he offers only a terse nod, donkey ears safely concealed again. Whatever the exact steps might be, you sense a renewed focus in the king's posture. He's come a long way, yet the hardest part, perhaps the silliest, yet most spiritually fraught act, lies ahead. If he fails to appease Apollo and Pan, well, donkey ears might be the least of his worries. But at least now, there's a plan. And so begins the next leg of this strange odyssey, guided by cryptic words and a desperate hope for a donkey-free future. You gather your things, prepare the donkeys, and set forth once more under the silent mountain sky, aware that the realm of myths is rarely straightforward, but always brimming with possibility. You set off at dawn once again, guiding the donkeys along a hidden mountain trail toward the meadow the oracle described. Midas rides ahead, hunched slightly, hood concealing his donkey ears. There's a determined edge to his gaze now, fueled by the oracle's cryptic promise: find a place sacred to both Pan and Apollo, make your offering and, maybe, this donkey curse will finally vanish. The wind at these heights is crisp, carrying the scent of pine and distant waterfalls. You can't help but inhale deeply, half expecting a trace of magic in the air. After hours of steady ascent, the trail dips into a secluded valley. Sunlight spills across rolling green slopes dotted with wildflowers, poppy red, saffron gold, and snowy white blossoms that glow in the morning rays. A gentle hum of insects surrounds you, and birds flit through the air, weaving a tapestry of sound. The place feels alive, almost humming with ancient energy. Midas halts his donkey, scanning the horizon for any clue of a hidden altar or shrine. But all you see is nature in full bloom. It's only when you dismount and walk deeper into the meadow that you detect the faint roar of rushing water. A short distance away, the land slopes downward into a rocky gorge, where a crystalline river gushes along a series of small cascades. A narrow footpath beckons you closer, and soon you find yourselves standing at the edge of a rocky ledge, gazing into a wide, shallow pool fed by a roaring waterfall. Sunbeams filter through overhead branches, turning the mist into a glowing haze. You share a glance with Midas. Could this be the spot the oracle hinted at? It certainly has the wild, natural vibe Pan would appreciate, with the dramatic, sunlit water that might please Apollo's sense of splendor. Midas slides off his donkey and crouches near the riverbank, swirling his hand in the cold water. His donkey ears, free of the hood for a moment, twitch at the roar of the falls, soaking in the thunderous rhythm like a peculiar lullaby. A comedic aside, it's almost as if the ears have a mind of their own, enthralled by the churning water's symphony. At least they seem momentarily too fascinated to betray Midas's anxiety. A mainstream historical fact nudges into your mind: in many regions of the ancient Greek and Anatolian world, ritual bathing was a key part of purification rites. Devotees cleansed themselves in sacred springs before praying to the gods, believing the waters could wash away misfortune or spiritual miasma. Midas's predicament, donkey ears courtesy of Apollo's curse, might very well be the perfect scenario for such a cleansing. And indeed, legend has long claimed that Midas found redemption by bathing in a flowing river, the Pactolus, some say, though historians still argue whether that detail was appended to the story later to explain why certain riverbeds yielded flecks of gold. Regardless of the story's evolution, you sense Midas is about to test these waters for himself. He motions for the guards to hang back, wanting a private moment. Slipping off his sandals, he steps gingerly into the shallows. The cold shocks him. You see him gasp, donkey ears quivering at the sudden temperature change. He presses forward, each footstep stirring up rivulets of silt and swirling leaves. The water laps around his knees, then his waist, until finally he stands beneath the cascade spray, the thunderous downfall drenching him from head to toe. With eyes closed, he raises his arms, letting the water pummel him, as if it might knock sense, or grace, back into his spirit. Your heart twists with sympathy, recalling how Midas once rid himself of the golden touch by bathing in a sacred river. Does he harbor a glimmer of hope that this same method will again set him free? Or is he merely following the oracle's instructions, desperate to do anything that might appease two gods whose rivalry cast him into this comic, yet tragic predicament? From your vantage on the bank, you notice the donkey ears flatten under the water's force, a drenched mop of fur that occasionally flicks droplets in all directions. You can't help but stifle a laugh at the sight. Third comedic aside, donkey ears are never subtle, but soaked donkey ears take, awkward, to a whole new level. Still, beneath the comedy lies an earnestness that tugs at you. Midas seems to be pouring his entire being into this act, silent prayers tumbling from his lips lost amid the roar of the waterfall. Time stretches, and the guards shift uneasily on the bank. Nothing overtly miraculous occurs, no sudden flash of light or thunderbolt from the sky. Eventually, Midas emerges, water streaming down his cloak, donkey ears plastered to his head. You all gather around him, scanning his face for any sign of a change. He raises a trembling hand to one ear, brushing it tentatively. The look in his eyes says it all: no immediate transformation. The donkey ears remain. A hush settles, thick with disappointment. But Midas is no quitter. He squelches through the shallows, dripping onto the rocky ledge. He glances at you with a quiet determination and says, "The oracle's words weren't just about bathing. There's an offering to be made, a prayer that honors both Pan and Apollo." You recall the cryptic instructions about merging the wild rhythms of Pan with the refined melody of Apollo. Midas, donkey ears shivering in the breeze, confides his plan to craft a small altar right here, by the waterfall, because this spot brims with the dual energies of nature and music. You help gather flat stones and driftwood, assembling them near the water's edge. Midas places a small gold token on the makeshift altar, one of the few he carries, a remnant of his once cursed golden touch. Around it, he arranges wildflowers plucked from the meadow, a symbol of Pan's untamed domain. Then, in a surprising twist, he lifts a slim wooden lyre from his pack, something he brought in secret. He explains that even though Pan's pipes bested Apollo in his mind, it's time to acknowledge that Apollo's music surpasses mortal comprehension. A comedic mental image donkey ears playing a lyre. Sure, it might seem odd, but stranger things have happened in these mythic hills. With quiet reverence, Midas plucks a few trembling notes, each resonating through the gorge. He stumbles, uncertain, then tries again. This time, the melody steadies, echoing in gentle ripples that mingle with the roar of water. The combination is haunting, the raw power of the waterfall and the delicate strains of a lyre. Perhaps this is what the oracle meant, a literal merging of Pan's wild nature. The crashing falls, and Apollo's refined music, the lyre's tinkling chords. For a moment, you feel the hush of the forest leaning in, as if every bird and insect wants to witness whether two mighty gods can be pleased at once. Historians still argue whether Midas ever truly atoned for his misguided musical judgment. Some versions say the donkey ears vanished the instant he acknowledged Apollo's superiority, while others claim Pan himself took pity on Midas. Quirky or fringe sources even suggest that Midas simply learned to live with the ears, but wore them proudly as a testament to his devotion to the donkey cult he adored from childhood. Here, however, in the hush of your nighttime narrative, you sense that something intangible shifts in the air as Midas continues to play. One chord resonates longer than the rest, a bright echo bouncing from rock to rock before fading into the distance. In that lingering silence, Midas steps the lyre aside and steps back to the altar. A hush grips you all, a collective pause as if waiting for any sign. Thunder, sunlight bursting through clouds, the donkey ears disintegrating into dust. Nothing so dramatic occurs, but as Midas bows his head, the subtle crack of tension in his shoulders eases. He seems different, calmer, even if the ears remain for now. Maybe the real redemption is the acceptance of humility, the bridging of two divine muses, or simply the release of that stubborn pride that doomed him at the musical contest. When at last you leave the waterfall, the sun is high overhead. Midas dons his hood, donkey ears hidden for the trek back. The water might not have washed away his curse, but it has begun to wash away some of the bitterness, the frantic desperation that dogged his every step. There's a chance, at least, that Pan and Apollo heard his song. And as you guide the donkeys back into the meadow, flowers nodding gently in the breeze, you can't help but feel you've witnessed a small miracle already. Even if the donkey ears still rest on his head, something in Midas, something in his heart, has started to heal. You find yourself meandering beside Midas and his small entourage as they leave the misty gorge behind, treading a winding footpath that opens into rolling hills. The tension of that sacred waterfall ceremony still echoes in your mind. After all, you just witnessed a man with donkey ears trying to appease two rival gods with a single heartfelt song. Now, there's a sense of quiet anticipation. No one is sure if the donkey ears will soon melt away, or if they're here to stay. With each step, Midas seems more reflective, pausing now and then to take in the landscape and murmur soft wonderings about fate, humility, and the ever-perplexing gods. As you walk, the environment itself encourages a slower pace. The hills are dressed in tall grasses that sway in the breeze, shimmering gold in the midday sun. Occasionally, you spot a small cluster of wild poppies blazing red near the path. Butterflies flit among them, as though performing a lazy dance routine for any onlooker patient enough to watch. Birds swoop low, singing half-familiar tunes that remind you of Pan's playful pipe music. A comedic aside, you half expect a donkey-eared bird to pop out and greet Midas in solidarity. Thankfully, it's just the standard variety of winged creatures overhead. Gradually, your thoughts drift to the tapestry of myths that color this land. Midas's donkey ears feel like just one thread in a vast, sprawling weave of stories. Some well-known, others buried in dusty scrolls. A mainstream historical fact, ancient Greek culture was steeped in myth, with entire festivals dedicated to reciting epic poetry, local legends, and heroic sagas. The traveling bards who roamed from town to town would spin tales of gods, monsters, and mortals, often weaving fresh embellishments along the way. As a result, the same myth could take on countless variations, each shaped by the teller's whims and the audience's reactions. Here on the sleepy hillside, you indulge in a mental detour, recalling one or two of these lesser-known myths that revolve around donkeys. For instance, there's the short tale of how Dionysus once used a donkey to navigate through a flooded plain, an odd anecdote that appears in some minor texts. You imagine the wine god perched on a donkey's back, luscious grapevines trailing from his hands as he tries to keep his fine sandals dry. A comedic image indeed, the flamboyant Dionysus, patron of revelry, hitching a ride on a braying beast. But that's the thing about these minor stories. They reveal the playful side of the ancient pantheon, reminding you that not all myths involve epic battles or tragic love stories. Sometimes, they're just comedic interludes featuring an animal that, by nature, loves to bray at the most inconvenient moments. Historians still argue whether these smaller donkey-centered tales served as moral fables, comedic relief, or local cult propaganda aiming to elevate the donkey's status. After all, the donkey was crucial for agriculture and transport in many regions, prized for its endurance more than its charm. Nonetheless, donkey mania pops up in pockets of ancient lore, each variation shedding light on how common folk related to these braying beasts in daily life. Perhaps that explains why Midas's ears resonate so strongly. If even a king can be associated with a humble farm animal, then the boundary between high and low collapses in a puff of donkey fur. You recall another quirky tidbit. In certain Greek comedic plays, donkey characters were sometimes portrayed by masked actors who delighted the crowds with slapstick antics. These donkey masks had exaggerated features, massive ears, gaping mouths, and the actors would bray, dance, and chase each other around the stage to roars of laughter. There was even a festival in a few rural areas where donkey parades were said to usher in the harvest season, their brays symbolically driving away evil spirits. You can't help but think that Midas, donkey ears and all, might unwittingly be the perfect mascot for such a festival. If he could only embrace the comedic side of his predicament. Your internal musings are interrupted by Midas himself, who halts under a solitary oak tree. He glances up, donkey ears twitching slightly beneath his hood, as though they sense an unseen presence in the branches. For a moment, he presses a hand to his chest and closes his eyes. You can almost hear the echoes of his prayers, requests for release from this curse, or perhaps just the strength to endure it. When he opens his eyes again, there's a hint of amusement in them. Maybe it's the realization that in the pantheon of outlandish Greek transformations, Medusa's snake hair, Circe's pig men, even Zeus's countless metamorphoses, having donkey ears is relatively tame. A comedic aside, at least he's not stuck as a permanent donkey from head to hoof. Taking in the hush of the midday sun, you sense the group craving a moment's rest. The guards scout a suitable spot in the shade, and soon you're all seated on warm grass. Midas produces a small bundle of food, bread, olives, and dried figs. The donkey ears poke out slightly when he tilts his head, but no one comments. Everyone's grown used to avoiding the subject, even though it's the reason you're all on this meandering pilgrimage. Still, there's a comfortable camaraderie that's begun to form under the umbrella of shared secrecy. Maybe it's that traveling on foot, ducking into forests, fording streams, makes royalty and commoners alike just fellow wanderers facing the same thirst and fatigue. As you snack on bread and olives, your mind drifts again to the broader world of myths on the sidelines. Beyond donkey tales, there are so many curious footnotes in Greek lore: gods turned into trees, mortal heroes tricked by sly nymphs, entire cities rumored to vanish overnight. These minor stories often contain essential kernels of cultural identity, comedic or otherwise, overshadowed by famous epics like the Iliad and the Odyssey. And yet, these offbeat legends can be the best lullabies precisely because they focus on relatable moments, like a donkey braying at dawn or a king fumbling with a hood to hide his ears, rather than cataclysmic wars. Soon, everyone finishes eating and Midas stands, shaking crumbs off his cloak. He announces that you'll keep moving to find a good spot to camp by evening. One near a running stream, if possible, because he's grown partial to the sound of water ever since the waterfall ritual. The donkey ears twitch again, as if endorsing the idea. Onward you walk, weaving through a narrow ravine where wild thyme and rosemary release bursts of fragrance when crushed underfoot. Overhead, a hawk circles lazily, a faint dot in the expanse of blue sky. Twilight approaches by the time you find another stream. This one is calmer than the waterfall, trickling over smooth stones that glisten in the purple-orange light. The party sets up a modest campsite. Tents are pitched, and a small fire crackles to life. You watch the flames lick at dry kindling, throwing dancing shadows across the trunks of nearby trees. Midas sits a short distance away, donkey ears outlined by firelight, whenever a breeze lifts his hood. He doesn't attempt to hide them among friends tonight. Maybe he's too tired, or maybe he's reached a point of wary acceptance. As the evening cools, conversation drifts between practicalities. How to avoid bandits who will keep watch, and idle chatter about legends encountered on the road. One guard recounts hearing of a traveling poet who claims to have glimpsed a city of donkey worshippers across the Aegean Sea. Another wonders if a lesser deity might help Midas if Apollo and Pan remained silent. You note the open scholarly debate phrase slipping in. Historians still argue whether such donkey-centric cities truly existed or if they were mere lampooning by rival states. Whether true or not, the guard's story adds another comedic dimension to donkey mania, enough to draw a weary chuckle from Midas himself. In the hush that follows, your eyelids grow heavy. The crackling fire soothes you, its glow gentle on the surrounding darkness. You can sense Midas's own exhaustion. Perhaps you see him lean back against a smooth boulder, donkey ears poking out at angles that would be comical under normal circumstances. Yet tonight, the significance feels different, like a testament to how far he's journeyed, literally and metaphorically. Once, he was a king who wore those ears in shameful secrecy. Now, at least among these loyal companions, he's a man confronting his flawed judgment head on, ass or head ear, if you like. It's not exactly a triumph, but it's progress. Long after the others drift off to sleep, you remain awake a little longer, marveling at the star-strewn sky. Somewhere in the distance, a nightingale sings, layering notes over the gentle ripple of the stream. Your thoughts wander to the hidden corners of Greek mythology, where donkey obsessions and odd curses blend with ephemeral glimpses of grace. Isn't that the essence of bedtime stories? These gentle, wandering tangents, with just enough humor and curiosity to lull your mind into a dreamy space. Eventually, fatigue wraps around you like a warm cloak, and you lower yourself onto a patch of soft grass. The last thing you glimpse before drifting off is the silhouette of Midas's hood resting nearby, the faint outline of ears swaying in the breeze. In the grand symphony of myths, donkey ears might seem a silly instrument, yet they have a quiet melody all their own, one that's lulling you ever deeper into this peaceful night. Morning sunlight filters through the leafy canopy above, dappling the ground in shifting patterns of gold and green. You rouse yourself from slumber, feeling more refreshed than you expected after nights of traveling. Nearby, Midas stands at the edge of the campsite, donkey ears angled slightly beneath his hood, perhaps listening to the birds' dawn chorus, or maybe just lingering in a rare moment of tranquility. The guards stir, gathering supplies and stoking the remains of the fire for a quick breakfast. Soon, you'll be on the move again, though the precise direction feels uncertain. The donkey ears remain, so the quest clearly isn't over. Yet, in the hush of this morning, your thoughts drift to the swirl of debates that surround Midas's legend. Even now, centuries later, in academic circles, the donkey-eared king sparks passionate arguments. You picture modern historians in a stuffy lecture hall, leaning over well-thumbed scrolls and half-broken pottery shards, each determined to prove a different angle about the real Midas and his donkey mania. Perhaps one scholar stands at the podium, referencing the textual fragments that place Midas as an 8th century BCE Phrygian ruler who negotiated with Assyrian kings. Your mainstream historical fact. Meanwhile, someone else counters with a comedic scribble found on an ancient wine cup depicting a donkey-eared figure labeled Midas. Cue the entire hall's amused snickers. A comedic aside, you can almost hear the exasperated coughs as the serious historians roll their eyes at such silly wordplay. Historians still argue whether the donkey-ear stories are purely symbolic, or if some physical ailment might have been exaggerated over time. Booms another speaker in your mind's eye, scanning the room with a pointed look. The donkey motif might symbolize everything from vanity punished by the gods to a misunderstood condition that gave Midas elongated ears, like some rare genetic quirk. Or the donkey obsession could be a comedic flourish added by playwrights, stoked by the traveling bards who loved any story that made an audience laugh. At least 3 comedic pokes can be made out of that scenario alone: a king wearing donkey earmuffs, donkey earwigs in stage plays, or donkey-themed comedic relief in local festivals. You glance at Midas, pondering how he might respond if he heard these modern debates. Would he be relieved that some folks doubt the literal existence of donkey ears, or annoyed that others immortalize him as the donkey-eared buffoon? Maybe he'd smirk at the notion that Donkey Mania was a carefully constructed brand, a royal marketing ploy. After all, even in the ancient world, rumor and propaganda had a way of entrenching themselves in public consciousness. A quirky tidbit: certain city-states in antiquity minted coins depicting local legends. If Fridge had minted donkey ear coins, that might have become the ancient world's equivalent of a viral meme, guaranteeing Midas's comedic fame for centuries. Luckily or unluckily for him, no such coins have been found yet. When you finally break camp, you notice Midas has rummaged through his pack and retrieved a small scroll. It's tattered, the ink faded, but you recognize it as a record from one of his kingdom's official scribes. Perhaps it details the lineage of Phrygian rulers, or a legal code that references Midas's reign, anything that might connect him to a time before donkey ears were his defining trait. You sense he's seeking proof of his legitimacy, a reminder that he was once respected, donkey, free and recognized for more than comedic missteps. The path leads you across gentle hills, speckled with budding wildflowers, the occasional donkey bray echoing from a distant farmstead. Each bray triggers a flick from Midas's ears beneath his hood, a reminder that the curse is still very real. You tread carefully over the uneven ground, the sky overhead a brilliant blue. Eventually, you stop by a small stream to refill water skins, and you overhear the guards discussing fringe theories about donkey worship. One guard claims he heard tales of a breakaway sect that revered donkey-headed idols, believing these figures to be a channel to the fertility gods. Another guard scoffs, calling it pure nonsense. Still, you catch that glint of curiosity in their eyes. Myths have a funny way of embedding themselves into day-to-day chatter, turning the improbable into possibility. A second comedic aside, just imagine that donkey cult's membership card, complete with braying initiation rites. As midday heat settles in, you reach a crossroads marked by a weathered stone stele. Its inscription is nearly effaced, but you can make out references to Apollo and a communal festival once held in his honor. Midas pauses there. You realize that he's reflecting on his predicament with Apollo, the very god who twisted his ears. He runs a cautious hand under the hood, feeling the fur. If only. His expression seems to say, I'd chosen Apollo's music that day. Perhaps you're reminded of the open scholarly debate that rages on. Some argue Midas offended Apollo in a real festival, while others maintain the donkey ear episode is purely mythical. Regardless, the living proof stands before you, donkey ears rustling in the wind. There's your third comedic jab, a living myth rummaging about the countryside in a desperate attempt to donkey-fy himself. A breeze stirs, bringing relief from the sun's glare, and the group decides to push on, leaning into the next stretch of road. Dust swirls around your sandals, and the donkey hooves clack steadily on the packed earth. This rhythmic lull invites a mental tangent about how myths and real history intermingle. Consider the Trojan War. Many believe it was inspired by real conflicts, embellished over time with gods meddling in mortal battles. Similarly, Midas's donkey ears might have started as a rumor or comedic symbol, some ancient comedic poet's invention, then snowballed into an accepted part of his legend. Or maybe he truly upset Apollo, and the donkey ears are no metaphor at all. To the ancient mind, both scenarios were plausible. Before long, you crest a hill and discover a small farming settlement nestled by a cluster of olive trees. It's a humble place, a few mud, brick houses, goats and donkeys grazing in a makeshift pen. The villagers approach cautiously, curiosity in their eyes. They've likely heard rumors, everyone has, about the donkey-eared king. Midas lowers his gaze, pulling the hood further down. You sense his shoulders tense, anticipating whispered gossip. Yet these people appear more intrigued than mocking. One older villager gingerly steps forward, pressing an offering of fresh bread into Midas's hands. Perhaps they see him not as a monster or a fool, but as a traveler in need. It's a humbling moment for a king whose ears are now proof that he's as mortal as anyone else, subject to the gods' whims and the quiet mercy of strangers. After sharing a brief meal, you continue on, skirting the settlement with polite nods. It's a reminder that not everyone in the ancient world saw curses as purely comedic fodder. Some might consider donkey ears a sign of divine election, a twisted mark of favor or peculiar destiny. Others might interpret them as an omen, good or bad. One extra comedic scenario crosses your mind. Imagine a roadside prophet hollering, "Behold the donkey-eared king, for he shall lead us to a land of braying bounty." Sometimes, even the strangest transformations can inspire a cult following. When evening rolls in, you make camp beside a weathered oak tree. Midas seems subdued, weighing the swirl of debates that both ancient and modern minds endlessly stoke. He's living proof of how myth and reality can fuse into a story that refuses to fade, each telling morphing a detail here and there. And as you settle down to rest, donkey ears flicker in the orange glow of the dying sun. You're reminded of one final truth. The donkey mania at the heart of Midas's tale may forever be a point of contention, but it's also undeniably captivating, bridging comedic curiosity and solemn cautionary moral. The hush of night returns. Stars prick the sky, and the warm breeze tussles the tall grass. The guards share a few final jokes before sleep. Something about hair accessories, or whether the donkey ears might improve Midas's hearing. You roll your eyes, but can't help the faint grin tugging at your lips. After all, if this donkey business weren't so bizarre, it wouldn't have endured for centuries as a legend that scholars still can't settle. And in the hush of these ancient hills, you find that persistent, unsolved riddle oddly comforting. Some myths, it seems, are meant to remain delightfully unresolved. You stand on a rise overlooking a small valley where a patchwork of fields and orchards stretches into the distance. The lingering warmth of the afternoon sun wraps around you like a comforting shawl. At your side, Midas rests against a mossy boulder, donkey ears hidden by the usual hood. He's silent, thoughtfully scanning the horizon, no doubt wondering if his predicament will remain tethered to him forever. Even after all the journeys, rituals and apologetic prayers, the donkey ears persist, a silent testament to his fateful clash with Apollo. If the gods are testing him, they're thorough. Once you descend the slope, you find a footpath leading through a quiet hamlet. A breeze drifts through the olive groves, carrying the soft rustle of leaves and the occasional bray from a donkey pen. It's the kind of sound you've grown oddly accustomed to, like a gentle chorus following Midas's every move. Though you try to remain inconspicuous, a curious child peeking from a nearby farmhouse stares a bit too long at Midas's hood. The donkey ears occasionally press against the cloth, and in that moment, you suspect the child sees more than an ordinary traveler. Still, they say nothing. Sometimes a wordless stare can speak volumes. Just past the hamlet, there's an old roadside shrine with chipped paint and faded carvings of satyrs. A small crowd gathers around a traveling storyteller, an older woman with a commanding presence. She waves her hands dramatically as she recounts a myth. You partially recognize it's a tale of a donkey-eared king, but the details are twisted in ways that surprise even you. In her version, the king's donkey ears were given by a jilted goddess of the harvest, furious that he disrespected her fields. Each line earns gasps from her audience, especially the children, who hang on every exaggerated word. Midas lingers at the edge of the crowd, hood drawn low, donkey ears stiff beneath the fabric. You sense his mixture of horror and fascination, hearing his own legend spun into a story that barely resembles the truth. A comedic aside, you nearly laugh at the notion of donkey ears as a harvest curse. Who would have guessed wheat fields and donkey ears went hand in hand? But that's how folklore works, morphing tales across regions and centuries. When the storyteller finishes, the listeners applaud politely, tossing a few coins into her wicker basket. As she packs up, you overhear her mention that some folks have even glimpsed the donkey-eared king wandering the countryside at dusk, perpetuating the rumor that Midas roams like a wandering phantom. Stepping away, Midas looks shaken, but you can't help feeling a hint of awe at how quickly stories travel, morph, and multiply, especially in lands so steeped in myth. A mainstream historical fact comes to mind in ancient Greece. Professional storytellers or rhapsodes roamed from city to city, weaving local legends into epic verses or comedic vignettes. Thanks to these itinerant performers, any rumor, like a king's donkey ears, could gain near-instant legendary status. Before long, the donkey-eared figure might become a staple of tavern gossip or a comedic role in a local play. You move on, following the winding path between gnarled olive trees. The sun begins its descent, tinting the world in soft orange hues. Midas keeps his hood carefully pulled down, though the donkey ears occasionally catch on a branch or snag in the cloth, each mishap prompting a muffled yelp. You wish the situation were less dire so you could fully enjoy the humor. A comedic image of donkey ears tangling in vines, forcing a king to do a ridiculous little dance until he's free. At least this time, no spectators appear to witness it. As evening deepens, you and the small entourage make camp beside a crumbling stone wall. Perhaps it once enclosed a vineyard. The group kindles a modest fire, its glow illuminating the faces around you. Over a simple meal of bread, cheese, and dried figs, the conversation inevitably circles back to donkey ears and the odd sightings that have persisted long after Midas's reign. How travelers speak of donkey-eared apparitions in moonlit groves, or claim to see donkey-eared statues in forgotten ruins. That's the thing about legends. Once they latch onto the collective imagination, they endure in the strangest forms. A quirky tidbit arises. Rumor claims that in certain remote valleys, old hermits intentionally fashion donkey-ear headdresses for nighttime rituals, believing these ears confer a special connection with nature's hidden voices. Whether that's pure invention or a snippet of truth remains anyone's guess. But you feel a spark of amusement at the thought of entire groups donning donkey ear hats under the full moon, braying their prayers to Pan. Midas merely shakes his head, donkey ears flicking at the mention of it, unwilling to engage with such outlandish rumors. Yet you sense he's faintly intrigued. After all, if donkey ears truly open a channel to the wild, might that explain why he sometimes senses subtle shifts in the breeze or the calls of distant animals? Later, as the night sky unfolds overhead, someone brings up the bigger question: if donkey ears can appear once in a legend, might there be future sightings as well? Historians still argue whether these recurring donkey ear motifs across different regions point to a shared mythic archetype. One guard muses, echoing the open scholarly debate: could it be that donkey ears are a convenient symbol for folly, hubris, or bridging the gap between human and beastly nature? Or is it simply comedic gold, something that never fails to raise eyebrows and donkey ears in any crowd? Midas, absorbing this conversation in silence, eventually trudges off a short distance to stare at the moonlit horizon. You can see the silhouette of those ears in the faint light, reminding you that he's both the subject and the victim of these swirling tales. He must wonder if he'll ever escape being an icon of donkey mania. A comedic jab drifts through your mind. Maybe if he scowls hard enough, the ears will wilt and fall off out of sheer embarrassment. But the hush of the moment holds you back from voicing it. Instead, you wander closer, noticing how Midas's posture has changed over these many days. Less rigid, more introspective. He seems more resigned to living with his donkey ears, at least for now, even if there's still a hope that some final stroke of divine mercy will restore him. All these sightings, he whispers, voice low. What if I'm doomed to be an eternal footnote in every bedtime story? The donkey-eared king, forever braying in the corners of people's imaginations. He almost laughs, a sad chuckle that dissipates into the cool night air. You place a comforting hand on his shoulder, remembering that not all tales end neatly. Some slip into the collective memory precisely because they remain a bit unfinished. Perhaps Midas's donkey ears are destined to linger in lore, resurfacing every time a traveling bard needs a comedic cautionary tale or a local festival demands a costume donkey dance. Yet, in this living moment, Midas is still a man searching for closure, bridging that precarious gap between myth and reality. Eventually, you both return to the small campfire where the guards have drifted into a quiet doze, lulled by the lullaby of cicadas and rustling leaves. A donkey, tethered nearby, flicks its ears at your approach as if greeting kin. Midas offers it a gentle pat on the neck, donkey ears peeking from under his hood in an almost tender parallel. Perhaps the beast sense a kindred spirit in him. For an instant, it's oddly serene. Human and donkey, side by side, under a moon that's seen countless legends come and go. You settle by the fire, letting its warmth chase away the night chill. In the darkness, your mind conjures images of donkey-eared figures in dusty scrolls, cameo appearances in comedic plays, or half-remembered songs that children chant when playing in courtyards. All around you, these half-truths and full-blown legends swirl, refusing to be pinned down. Sometimes the line between folklore and reality is as blurry as footprints on a windy beach. But right here, in this hush, a king with donkey ears breathes softly, living proof that legends can outgrow their original roots and still not sum up the whole person at their center. Gradually, sleep beckons, tugging at your eyelids. Before slipping into slumber, you cast one last look at Midas, whose donkey ears tilt as he tilts his head toward the stars. As long as they remain, those ears will tether him to centuries of braying rumors and comedic anecdotes. But perhaps in embracing the bizarre and unexplainable, he has started writing his own quiet footnote, a gentle reminder that myths, no matter how outlandish, always have a living pulse beneath them. You awaken to the soft glow of a new day, dew sparkling on every blade of grass. The fire has long since reduced to embers, and a gentle breeze carries the faint bray of a distant donkey. An almost familiar lullaby by now. Midas is already up, standing a short distance away. The hood is off for once, exposing the donkey ears in the cool dawn light. For a moment, you marvel at how calm he appears, as though he's finally stopped fighting the reality perched atop his head. You sense a different energy in him, like he's on the brink of some deeper acceptance. Or perhaps he's simply too wary to battle the curse any longer. Still, there is a quiet resolution about him. His posture is straighter, his movements purposeful. When he notices you stirring, he offers a small smile, one that says he's made peace with a few things overnight, even if the donkey ears remain. You recall all the half-finished prayers, the frantic journeys, the comedic bungles in vines, and think to yourself maybe this is the start of a gentler chapter in his tale. He seems to have traded desperation for humility, the brimming panic once in his eyes now softened into something more contemplative. After a sparse breakfast, the group continues, heading down an ancient road that once saw caravans of traders. A mainstream historical fact whispers in your mind: by the 8th and 7th centuries BCE, Phrygia, the kingdom often associated with Midas, was a bustling hub, drawing merchants from across the Aegean and beyond. In those days, wealth flowed through these paths like water in a springtime stream. Now, only fragments of that past remain, crumbling milestones and traces of long, abandoned market stalls. You sense Midas tracing a silent line between his golden era and the modest realities he faces now. By mid-morning, you pass an old boundary marker carved with a faint lion symbol. Midas stops, running his fingers over the worn relief, as if recalling a time when such symbols declared his realm's power. The donkey ears twitch slightly, a tangible reminder that no matter how grand one's legacy, the gods can humble you in startling ways. A comedic aside, you imagine a lion crest updated to feature donkey ears, emblematic of the House of Midas. Not exactly the regal brand he'd envisioned, but it would make for an unforgettable coat of arms. Gradually, the land flattens into a broad plain. Patches of wildflowers dot the fields, and you see the occasional shepherd herding goats. Whenever a donkey appears on the horizon, Midas pauses, donkey ears cocked, as though greeting a distant cousin. It's become a small running joke. Each time, someone in the group shares an exaggerated wave, calling out, "Family reunion, Your Majesty." The good-humored ribbing might once have stung, but now Midas just lets out a soft chuckle. Acceptance, it seems, can be oddly liberating. The sun reaches its zenith, and you find shelter under a lone mulberry tree for a midday rest. Midas sets down his pack, rummaging through the scrolls and trinkets he's carried along. Leftovers of attempted cures, pilgrimages, and offerings. He flips absently through a few scrawled prayers, shaking his head with a rueful smile. "I tried so many ways to rid myself of these ears," he murmurs, half to himself. "But maybe that's been the problem. My own pride kept me convinced I could fix what Apollo gave me." His words hang in the air, heavy with a realization. You sense that final atonement stirring within him, a willingness to accept his flaw without trying to strong-arm the gods into reversing it. This is a lesson, after all, that resonates in many Greek myths. Sometimes the greatest humility comes not from winning divine favor, but from acknowledging mortal limitations. A quirky tidbit flutters in your memory. Certain fringe ascetic groups in the ancient world practiced public displays of humility, like wearing itchy goat, hair shirts or standing on one leg for hours, believing it brought them closer to divine truth. By accident, perhaps Midas's donkey ears have become his own perpetual display of humility. You continue onward, the afternoon light turning honey gold. The guards are quieter than usual, perhaps sensing the king's introspective mood. Eventually, you crest a small hill that offers a panoramic view of distant mountains. Midas halts there, gazing out at the seemingly endless horizon. He kneels down, placing his palms on the warm earth, donkey ears quivering in the breeze. A hush settles over the group, as though even the wind decides to hold its breath. You watch as he closes his eyes and murmurs something. An acknowledgement, a confession, or perhaps just a simple thank you. It's not the grand ritual you've witnessed before: no chanting priests, no golden altars, no donkey-laden sacrifices. Instead, it's raw, unguarded honesty. Midas rises slowly, tears glimmering in his eyes, but there's also a quiet, steady serenity in his expression. It's as if he's chosen to live with the curse rather than let it define or torment him further. In that moment, you recall the open scholarly debate that still swirls around Midas's myth. Historians still argue whether the donkey-eared king ever truly learned humility or spent his final days in bitter isolation. Some might say. Others paint him as a penitent figure who retreated from public life to atone for his hubris, eventually finding peace in the countryside. Here, in your own hush-filled version of events, you see a man who has confronted every comedic twist and cosmic punishment the gods threw his way and emerged with a softened soul. Whether the donkey ears remain or not seems almost secondary now. A comedic second jab bubbles up. If Midas wants to teach others about humility, he could start a donkey ear school of etiquette. Straighten those ears, folks, and bow low to the gods. Perhaps it would become the next big trend in spiritual retreats. Donkey-eared meditation, guaranteed to dissolve your pride one bray at a time. The mere thought draws a subdued chuckle from you, and maybe from Midas as well, if he caught a glimpse of your amused expression. Before dusk settles, you approach the outskirts of a small settlement. Its people are just finishing their day's labor, herding goats and donkeys back into pens. Midas doesn't shrink from their stares this time. He walks calmly, hood still in place, but not desperately tugged down to conceal every hint of his ears. A few villagers cast curious glances, others greet him with polite nods. One or two children peer wide-eyed, but their parents hush them gently, and life rolls on without fanfare. You sense that even if they realized who Midas is, they might just shrug. Another cursed king. We've heard stranger tales. As evening descends, the group finds a quiet spot under a cluster of plane trees to camp. A soft glow of lantern light spills from the settlement's nearest houses, illuminating dancing moths and the silhouettes of donkey ears, now slightly visible through Midas's hood. He talks more freely tonight, sharing memories of simpler times. Days spent in the orchard as a child, brushing his favorite donkey's coat, or sneaking extra figs to the stable animals. It's almost nostalgic, a gentle acceptance of the donkey mania that's always colored his life, now stripped of shame or grand ambition. The conversation wanders, as it tends to do under starry skies, from the quirks of donkey behavior to fleeting recollections of Greek gods who meddle in mortal affairs. Your third comedic aside surfaces, you imagine a pantheon meeting where Pan and Apollo argue over who won the donkey ear debate, only for Zeus to roll his eyes and say, "Seriously, you two? Donkey ears again?" Indeed, the comedic possibilities are endless when gods have so much free time to toy with mortals. Eventually, the hush grows deeper. Midas stares at the flickering embers of the campfire, donkey ears tilting in a subtle sign of relaxation. There's a wariness there, but also relief. You suspect that, for him, the journey's real destination was never about physically losing the ears, but about surrendering the pride and fear that made them such a torment. Tomorrow, you'll walk on, but tonight, you glimpse the king truly at peace for the first time since those donkey ears sprouted. In that tranquility, a lesson stands tall. Perhaps the surest way to overcome a curse is to relinquish the fight and learn to coexist with it, shaping it into wisdom rather than agony. The next morning arrives with a gentle warmth, and you set out once more with Midas, donkey ears subtly peeking beneath his hood. Despite the familiar bray of local farm animals echoing in the background, there's a lightness to his step that you haven't seen before. No longer is he slouching or snapping at each twig crack. His shoulders, once weighed down by shame, carry themselves with a newfound calm. You follow a narrow path toward a broad riverbank, the current sparkling under the morning sun. Birds swoop low over the water, their wings casting faint shadows on the rippling surface. One of the guards mentions this river as a significant trade route in antiquity, recalling a mainstream historical fact. Many ancient settlements flourished alongside navigable rivers, where merchants bartered goods like grain, wine, and livestock. The guard notes how donkey caravans were essential for hauling those goods inland. Another quips that if donkey caravans built empires, then donkey ears might have built legends, slipping in a dry comedic reference to Midas's predicament. For once, Midas grins rather than winces, letting the remark bounce off him like water off a duck's back. You settle on the grassy bank for a pause, letting the gentle rush of water fill the silence. Midas kneels down by the edge, swirling his fingertips through the cool current. It reminds you of the numerous attempts he's made to wash away the donkey curse. But if he's learned anything, it's that no single ritual can undo a lesson the gods want him to absorb. Instead, acceptance has crept in, a more potent bomb than any half-hearted prayer. Soon, a small fishing boat appears upstream. A pair of rowers, arms glistening in the sun, guide the vessel across the water. The man at the helm waves and calls out a greeting, seemingly unbothered by the king's veiled headgear. Maybe word of donkey ears has already reached this corner of the land, or maybe these travelers are simply too focused on their journey to pry. Either way, you sense no threat here, just the comforting hum of everyday life. Midas returns a polite wave, donkey ears hidden, yet no longer the all-consuming secret they once were. A short distance away, you spot a modest ferry crossing, a wooden raft hauled by rope to shuttle folks across the river. A cluster of people waits to board, carrying baskets of produce, clay pots, and a couple of restless goats. You wonder if Midas will risk crossing with them, donkey ears potentially glimpsed at close quarters. He seems momentarily hesitant, but then he nods to you and the guards, motioning that it's time. Perhaps this is another small step in his final transformation, traveling among ordinary people, without trembling at every sideways glance. You join the queue on the raft, listening to the goats bleat and the ferryman call instructions. As the raft sways away from shore, you clutch the rope for balance. The sun beats down overhead, the water shimmering beneath you. A comedic aside passes through your thoughts. if the donkey ears show themselves, maybe the goats will greet Midas as one of their own, forming an impromptu barnyard choir in mid-river. Oddly enough, such a scene would hardly surprise you anymore, given the comedic twists this journey has taken. Halfway across, you catch a few curious stares. One child tugs at her mother's sleeve, pointing to the lumpy shape under Midas's hood. The mother hushes her, glancing warily at the guard's spears. Midas closes his eyes, seemingly bracing for gossip or ridicule, but it doesn't come. The raft bumps against the opposite bank, and the ferryman lowers a creaking plank. Everyone disembarks, busy with their own concerns. No snickering or finger-pointing. The hush of acceptance is more powerful than an outburst of shock. Walking up the slope from the riverbank, the group disperses in separate directions, some heading to a nearby village, others traveling toward distant hills. Midas lingers, donkey ears flicking at the rustle of reeds in the shallows. You sense that he's on the threshold of deciding how his story will proceed from here. A guard quietly suggests returning to the palace, but Midas simply shakes his head. Whether he chooses to reclaim his throne, roam the countryside, or dedicate himself to a humble life, the donkey ears remain part of his identity now. Perhaps the real transformation is internal, not an outward miracle. Historians still argue whether Midas, in the final stage of his life, cast off his crown to live as a rustic hermit. Some maintain he vanished into the countryside, never again to rule from a gilded throne. Others depict him reclaiming his palace with newfound wisdom, donkey ears or not, and governing with a gentler hand. A quirky tidbit asserts that in certain rural corners, people continued to place donkey ear tokens on local shrines in tribute to a rumored wise king who heard every plea. Maybe that notion sprang from the idea that donkey ears confer better hearing, or maybe folks simply needed a symbol of humility in a world dominated by proud rulers. Whatever the truth here and now, Midas seems content not to declare anything final. Instead, he rests a moment on a fallen log, donkey ears tilting to catch the watery breeze. He gazes out at the rolling farmland, as though absorbing the simple beauty he's overlooked for too long. If the donkey curse once represented cosmic mockery, it now feels like a gateway, a soft nudge to pay attention, to let go of arrogance, to listen in ways he never did before. He meets your eyes and offers a subtle smile that almost says, "I'm okay, really." And in that wordless exchange, you share a flicker of understanding. Not every curse must be eradicated for life to continue meaningfully. Sometimes, a curse morphs into a part of your story, shaping you into someone more empathetic, more open to life's oddities. It's not the outcome you expected when you first heard rumors about donkey ears sprouting from a king's head, but it's a resolution that feels, in its own quiet way, complete. As evening draws near, you help prepare a small camp beside a copse of willow trees just beyond the river. The guards lay down bedrolls, and the donkey you've been traveling with makes a contented snort as it grazes on lush grass. Midas stands at the water's edge, letting the sunset's reflection dance in his gaze. At one point, he gently lifts his hood, revealing the donkey ears fully, letting them catch the last rosy rays of daylight. There's no flinching, no awkward rush to cover them up. He just is. You sink into a sense of calm, allowing the hush of dusk to envelop you. Crickets begin their nightly serenade. The sky shifts to deep purple, and the faint pinpricks of stars appear overhead. A comedic last aside, if those ears glowed in the starlight, you might truly have an otherworldly bedtime scene on your hands. But they remain quietly, unfussily donkeyish, blending into the silhouette of the king who wears them. Eventually, Midas returns to the group, and you share a simple meal. Conversation is light, no frantic talk of cures or altars or cryptic oracles. Tonight, the donkey ears are just one more detail in the tapestry of the world, no more shocking than the shape of a cloud or the color of twilight. You feel your own eyelids grow heavy, lulled by the gentle acceptance that seems to cradle the entire camp. And as you curl up in your blankets, the last thing you see is Midas leaning against a willow trunk, donkey ears tilting at the music of the night. You sense he's finally found a measure of peace, a fitting end to a saga that began with greed and the god's ire. Sleep soon claims you, each breath in sync with the softened hush of this final scene in Midas's tale. You drift deeper into slumber, and now it's time for a gentle wind down. Those final 300 words that guide you from mythic reverie into the sweetest dreams. The hush around you becomes warmer, each soft rustle of leaves drawn out as though time itself is stretching into a lullaby. Imagine standing in the middle of this enchanted night, the air so still you can hear your own heartbeat. You breathe slowly, letting your chest rise and fall in a soothing rhythm that aligns with the quiet sway of tree branches overhead. The evening sky unfolds in limitless stars, tiny beacons that twinkle as a reminder of how vast and peaceful the universe can feel when you allow yourself to rest. Somewhere in the distance, a donkey brays. Softly, barely more than a hum in the cool air, you're reminded of Midas, who found a measure of calm in his acceptance of donkey ears. Let that sense of gentle surrender wash over you. No fuss, no frantic search for solutions. Just a soothing acknowledgement that sometimes life's quirks can become part of your story without defining who you are. Feel your shoulders settle, releasing any tension caught there. Let your mind drift like a leaf floating on a calm pond, each thought dissolving into the next, until there's only an easy stillness. The warm night surrounds you like a soft blanket, and each breath invites your body into deeper relaxation. If there's any lingering worry, let it fade into the starlight above. Everything else can wait until morning. And as you sink into that final embrace of sleep, hold on to the comforting notion that even the strangest curses, the wildest legends, eventually find their gentle close. May your dreams carry a whisper of this bedtime journey, starry nights, distant donkey brays, and the promise that acceptance so often leads to peace.